please visit my website, programtokill.net. Go to plans and prices for even more exclusive information. You can also support me now on Patreon. Add me on TikTok. And leave a like and comment.
Cult deprogrammer Ted Patrick.
That was no suicide, that was murder. And it, like Jim Jones, it wasn't no suicide, that was murder. Anytime you hypnotize a person to jump off of the Golden Gate Bridge or kill your family or kill yourself or anybody they tell you to kill, and they do it, the person responsible for that, the person that programmed them to do it in the first place.
Some of the men have been castrated, not all but some.
More bizarre details of a mass cult suicide in California. It's moving day at O.J. Simpson's estate. Authorities are moving some of his most precious possessions out of his reach.
I don't think they should take people's yearbooks and just, mugshot for no reason, It's not right.
Some folks say it's a crime to let big city cops take high school yearbooks. Besides, you wouldn't want them to see all the dumb things you wrote. Hello and welcome. I'm Andrea Zinga in Atlanta, and this is News Night. 2 days after their apparent mass suicide shocked the nation, new and bizarre details are still emerging about the 39 cult members who took their lives. Here's the very latest. The medical examiner says some of the male members of the Heaven's Gate group had been castrated. 30 victims have been identified, among those the brother of actress Nichelle, who starred in the original Star Trek series. CNN's Ann McDermott has more on the ongoing investigation.
The bodies have been removed. The autopsies are underway. And the families were being notified, even as investigators were removing files and computers. Any kind of evidence they think will help them figure out why 39 people killed themselves here. Robert Brunk was the first deputy on the scene and knew immediately it would be bad.
When I opened up the door, I noticed an odor that, in my past experience, has been associated with death.
Later, he was joined by his partner, Laura Gasick.
One of the most bizarre things you'd ever expect to see.
The dead were all members of a cult called Heaven's Gate, and this was the leader of Heaven's Gate.
I'm Doe.
Doe, born Marshall Applewhite, co-founded the Heaven's Gate cult back in the 70s with this woman who was called T. She died more than a decade ago. Applewhite made this informational tape in 1992. And in it, he said members were forbidden alcohol, tobacco, sex. In fact, according to the medical examiner, some of the dead men had been castrated, though apparently the operations were not recent. And there were other restrictions placed on cult members.
We have not had contact with him in over 20 years because part of their belief was to cut off ties with family and friends.
But Applewhite, or Doe, said Heaven's Gate was not necessarily boring.
If we hadn't had a lot of fun, we would have lost our marbles even more than we thought we had already lost our marbles.
Their goal was clear, to shed their human containers, their bodies, to go to heaven on a spaceship. In an odd footnote, one of the dead has been identified as the brother of actress Nichelle, the actress who played Lieutenant Uhura in the Star Trek television series, much of it set on a spaceship.
My brother was a highly intelligent and a beautifully gentle man. He made his choices, and we respect those choices.
Spaceships and other elements of science fiction were featured in a screenplay written by some of the members of the cult. An established screenwriter, who is not a cult member, was asked to polish the work.
The script opens with a series of vignettes, about 25, 30 vignettes of visitations, abductions of this higher source that they believed in, monitoring the Earth.
Meanwhile, a man who belonged to Heaven's Gate in 1994 talked about the upcoming transformation in a television interview.
We just have no way of knowing when it's going to happen, but we do feel that it's going to be soon, whether it's in months or a couple of years.
It would be 3 years after that interview when 39 members of Heaven's Gate took their own lives. Among the dead, their leader, Doe. Ann McDermott, CNN, Los Angeles.
Some relatives of the cult members who died are responding with pain and sadness. but a mother of one of the victims says her grieving began long ago. 41-year-old David Moore had talked to his mother just twice since he went to check out a cult meeting in San Francisco 21 years ago. In one conversation with his mother, Nancy Brown, he tried to explain the link between his beliefs and UFOs.
When I would question him about that, he would say, well, we don't know at this time when he made these comments, so things have changed in the last year or so, but he would say, we don't know if it's actually a physical craft. We don't know if we're going to be lifted up in our bodies or a craft is going to land. He would say the Bible talks about Elijah and, others going in a cloud of light. And he said they didn't know what kind of terms to use in those days, so they called it a cloud of light. So he said we choose to call that an unidentified flying object, but we feel that there is a higher kingdom that is watching out for this, that this earth is a garden. They have planted seeds, and they're going to cultivate the garden, and they will come for us. We will join them, and we don't know the specifics of how that's going to take place.
We'll have more on the investigation into the mass suicides on Newsnight Update at 1 a.m. Eastern, including a look at how the Heaven's Gate cult recruited its members.
Investigators here say they're convinced that the 39 deceased members of the cult called Heaven's Gate belonged to an isolated core group. Jennifer Author, CNN, San Diego, California.
One Heaven's Gate member who committed suicide was the brother of actress Nichelle Nichols. Nichols played Lieutenant Uhura on the original Star Trek television series. Nichols told CNN's Larry King her brother, Thomas Nichols, was an intelligent and gentle man, but she said at one point her family lost contact with him.
We had not heard from him in almost 20 years until several years ago when he just before my mother died, and he let us know that he was well and that he was happy where he was. And then just before the earthquake, he contacted me and let me know that their organization had intended to go public, and asked me what I thought would be the best way for them to let the world know what they were about and where they were going.
You can see Larry King's complete interview with Nichelle Nichols here on CNN at 2 a.m. Eastern. That's 11 p.m. Pacific. Much of our information about the Heaven's Gate cult is coming from people who once belonged to the group. Recruitment trips sometimes took them across the country. And as CNN's Dan Ronan reports, many of their thoughts were recorded on videotape.
For the past 2 decades, members of the Heaven's Gate cult periodically toured the U.S. looking for new members. Flyers like these were distributed in 1994 in Las Vegas, announcing a recruitment drive. Members spent much of their time on college campuses. Listen to this tape from a 1994 recruiting visit to the University of New Hampshire in Durham.
As we're about to leave our task, it can sound even more and more hard to believe. More and more science fiction. More and more like Looney Tunes. And we recognize that, and we know that that's how a lot of people can respond to it. But the truth is that we are about to leave.
The cult had apparently been around in one form or another since the early or mid-1970s. Look at this film from a 1972 recruitment meeting in Seattle, Washington. Even then, cult members were explaining how they'd be taken from Earth on a UFO.
Well, the time is not set, and we don't know exactly when it will happen. We feel it will be within months.
And what will it be when it does happen?
Well, it will be their demonstration and an opportunity for us to leave also on a craft.
Robert Rubin of Waldport, Oregon joined the cult in 1974. He says members took a vow of poverty.
We lived that life. We went to churches to ask for food, to ask for money for gas. You develop a pretty good attitude, actually, where you quit worrying about things. You know that actually everything's going to work out all right.
But it didn't work out. After 5 months, Rubin told Marshall Applewhite, the cult's leader, he was leaving. Rubin says he became disenchanted with the cult's direction.
They use the analogy of the butterfly, from the caterpillar to the cocoon to the butterfly. And they said that human beings were like that, and we could go through a change and get to the next level.
Dick Joslin of Tampa, Florida, is a former member who quit in 1990.
They always believed that the body was nothing more than a vehicle, like a car that you drive around.
Joslin says suicide was not discussed in the early years when he joined in the mid-1970s. He says things changed.
Like in 88 and 90, was there any discussion that we might have to leave spiritually, in our spirit? So, and I sort of made my own decision that if it ever came to that, I was out of the group. It never did come to that while I was in there. And of course, I'm glad I left before it did.
In 1994, members began to talk more openly about leaving the Earth for what they called the kingdom level above humans.
We realized that the kingdom level above humans, the level above human, and the evolutionary level above human, is a real, physical, many-membered place.
Dick Joslin spent some 15 years in the cult. He says members of Heaven's Gate isolated themselves from the rest of society once they joined. He says they did not fear death.
We all committed suicide when we destroyed our old lives. I left my job, we left homes, families, everything, just like Jesus commanded some to do, to go join this thing. So we all made the major step even back then. It wasn't that big a step in their minds.
Dan Ronan, CNN reporting.
He's a star on the court and now on the big screen. So why does Dennis Rodman do the things he does? Ask him yourself tonight. But first, the medical examiner of San Diego County joins us with the latest on the mass cult suicides. Plus, a victim's sister, Star Trek's Nichelle Nichols, talks about why her brother killed himself. Just ahead on Larry King Live.
Now, live in Washington, here's Larry King.
Good evening. Dennis Rodman was scheduled to be the guest for the full hour tonight. Dennis is here and will be with us in about 15 minutes as we go, of course, to the big story of the day. And we start in San Diego with with Calvin Vine. Calvin is the supervising medical examiner and investigator for San Diego. And Dr. Brian Blackburn is the medical examiner of San Diego County. Dr. Blackburn, have all bodies been autopsied now?
We've done 21 of the 39 autopsy examinations, and we expect by Monday we'll have them done.
Have the results been, cause of death been the same in all 21?
Well, we're pending the certificates right now until we get all the information, but there are no physical injuries on anybody. And the initial 5 cases we've done the almost complete toxicology on shows alcohol and phenobarbital.
Why will that combination kill you?
Well, the combination is a respiratory depression. It would cause one to fall asleep and go into coma, and then the breathing and the heart rate would slow down until someone passes away.
Is it painless?
Yes, quite. One just goes to sleep, really.
So they knew what they were doing and how to do it?
Yes, we understand that that's the case.
And you also know that it was done in stages, right? Certain people died before other people.
Yes, we have 2 reasons to believe that. Some of the bodies are more fresh dead than the others. Some of them are quite decomposed. And also there's some notes indicating 3 sort of groups. The first group to go, the second group, and then the final group.
Calvin Vine, what does the investigator for the medical examiner's office do?
What we are dealing with right now is trying to notify the families to let them know of their loved one's death and help them make their funeral arrangements.
How many have you reached?
Right now we only have 9 left to get notified. We have 30 of the families notified.
This is done by phone?
At the present time, yes, that is what we're doing.
Do you make calls personally?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell us how you handle a call like that?
Most of the families that we are talking with, we have set up a 1-800 number, so they're actually calling us and contacting us, and we're returning their calls and letting them know of the death.
That, I would guess, is the toughest kind of phone call to make.
It's very difficult, and we are quite professional, so we have that experience to go ahead and talk to these families and help them kind of through their time of need.
Do you ask them questions as well? Is there some sort of investigation to this?
Normally we do, but sometimes the families will offer more information than we really need.
The 9 you have not reached, is there a problem? Can we help you in any way? Do you know why we haven't reached 9?
Well, some of them have different driver's license from different states and have moved around quite a bit, so we don't really have an actual address on where their families are located. But we are very hopeful by the end of the weekend that we will be able to find these families.
And you do not release names until families are notified, right?
That is correct.
So no names have been released. Those that we know about are just through other sources.
That is correct.
Okay. Have you discussed with them this interest in UFOs? Do the family members know about this?
Some of the families have expressed that information to us, that their members are either belonging to cults or doing things different, or into X-Files and even into the Trekkies.
Did they know they were interested in computers?
Some of them are letting us know that they had limited knowledge about computers, but not really. The people that I have talked to have not expressed that information.
Has anyone seen the videotape farewell?
Not that I'm aware of. Just what has been broadcast from...
No, I mean any sent personally to families?
Negative.
Any of the families express interest in seeing it?
Most of the families are kind of upset that is being shown, and feels that it's kind of private, that it is personal property, and that they want it back and not have it shown.
Did they object to the police shooting of the tape?
I don't think so. I think the videotaping inside of the residence was quite beneficial, so that the families that have seen it can see that it was not a gruesome thing, that was kind of a peaceful setting.
Dr. Blackburn, what's the toughest part of your job in something like this?
Well, in a mass disaster, the biggest problem is identification. And we were very fortunate in this case that they were very organized and somewhat compulsive, and had passports and driver's licenses and birth certificates in their pockets. So everyone had identification right on them. So that eliminated one of our major problems.
There are stories circulating that the men were castrated. True?
Some of them have been, yes. This is a remote thing. It's not something acute that's happened in the last few days or weeks.
You mean it had been done sometime before?
Yes, that's right.
Were all of the men castrated?
No.
Is that, to your knowledge, part of this cult?
We've just heard some word about that, and so we've been checking on it. I have no idea what that's about.
We can say unequivocally, can we not, Dr. Blackburn, this is a suicide?
Yes, we can. The Sheriff's Department and our office has looked over these cases very well, and there is no indication of any foul play or any other outside persons being involved.
Calvin, when are the bodies sent to how are the bodies transported to families?
Local mortuaries will be making arrangements to pick up the bodies over the weekend. We're starting on Sunday night, and probably will get that accomplished by the first of the week.
Thank you both for spending time with us. This has been very tough, and we appreciate it. We'll take a break, and we'll come back with Nichelle Nichols, the wonderful actress who played Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek all those years, in movies as well. Her brother died. We'll ask her about that after this. In a couple of minutes, the great basketball star Dennis Rodman will join us. We are now joined at our studios in Los Angeles by Nichelle Nichols, the wonderful actress who played all those years Lieutenant Uhura on the Star Trek series and in 6 of the movies. Her brother Thomas, her younger brother, died. Did you know that Thomas was in this kind of organization, Nichelle?
I was aware that my brother had decided to join a religious organization some years ago. One of their purposes was to separate themselves from the family and friends, and to be very private in what they did.
So did you know about the computers and the space journeys and concepts? Did you know about that at all?
First, I want to say on behalf of my family and all of Tommy's sisters and brothers and nephews and and myself, that we're indeed very grateful to you, Larry, to have this opportunity to express our pain and our grief and our love for my brother. My brother was a highly intelligent and a beautifully gentle man. He made his choices, and we respect those choices.
How old was he, Nichelle?
He was born in 1938, April of 38. I guess you can imagine, since I became aware of what had happened, and becoming aware that my brother might be one of these people. We had not heard from him in almost 20 years until several years ago, when just before my mother died, and he let us know that he was well and that he was happy where he was. And then just before the earthquake, he contacted me and let me know that their organization had intended to go public, and asked me what I thought would be the best way for them to let the world know what they were about and where they were going.
So he had been removed from the family and only recently come back into the fold.
Only in the... yes.
Is the family in grief and shock?
Yes, of course.
Why have you come here tonight? I mean, this is a very difficult time for you.
Since it became known or rumored that it was my brother, even before I knew it was, we've been inundated with phone calls from the press, from reporters, from the paparazzi. I must say, though, outside my gate all day, all night and all day today, I must say, and I'd like to thank them for having been very respectful and very kind. I know it can be a madhouse and a very terrible an ordeal for someone, and it has been for us. But they were very respectful, but I cannot bring myself to do these many interviews, and so I was happy to come on with you to discuss with you my brother's life and where we are coming from as a family. There's a tragic irony that they should choose Hale-Bopp, this wonderful comet, this incredible celestial event that is only once in our lifetime, and we will never see for another 2,400 years. That it would be this event that would trigger their decision to leave their bodies, as they called it, to go onto another plane.
Nichelle, I want to ask you, if when we come out to Los Angeles, which will be in a couple weeks, would you come over and sit down? So we're together and we could talk a lot about this?
I would be
because
glad.
of your career and this almost incredible interchange of a Star Trek and this kind of event. A couple of other things, though. When you first heard about it, did you think this was your brother's group?
At first I did not really think so. And then as it came closer, some of the things that was being said, I recalled my brother speaking those words to me, and I became more and more and more convinced that he might be involved, but that this might be that group. This was a single group. They were not part of a mass cell or just a cell of a mass movement. Mm-hmm. This was this small group themselves who chose to make this.
You must also have consolation in that everybody who's talking about knowing them, and we'll talk with Dick Jost in a moment, who knew your brother well,
yes,
loved them, liked them,
Yes.
Everyone had great respect for them. They lived with dignity. They were great with their neighbors. They were kind to people.
Indeed,
And
yes.
they even died with a kind of dignity, don't you think? Just the way they did it.
Yes, with great dignity. And I recall his saying to me just before the earthquake, he came to visit me with some members, which was unprecedented, to let me know what they were about. And they talked about the great comet that would come someday, and they would know it. And the tragic irony is that I am in production now of children's programming, and Hale Bopp is one of the approaches that we're taking to teach children about science. And they've just written a beautiful song called Hale Bopp. And to have this kind of tragedy, the irony is painful for us.
Michelle, we'll see you in Los Angeles, and thank you.
I thank you,
Thank you for coming by.
And thank you.
We'll take a quick break, come back with Dick Jocelyn, and then Dennis Rodman. Don't go away. We're back. Joining us now in Tampa is former cult member Dick Jocelyn, who, by the way, was Thomas Nichols' good friend. How long were you in this group, Dick?
Hello, Larry. I was in the group for 15 years, from 1975 until 1990.
And you left why?
Well, I left because I had doubts about whether what the group was all about was really going to come to pass. I had some doubts about Doe because he seemed to be suffering a lot of strain as a result of handling the group on his own without T with him anymore. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of draw back into the world, which in a monastic communal setting like that divides you, and so it just felt like it was time for me to come back.
Did they talk then about suicide and travel and interplanetary things?
Well, they talked about all of those things, Larry. The suicide. I was with the group. We were all together when Jonestown occurred, and we were horrified by that, and certainly hoped that we would never do something like that. But after all the years of waiting, I think they finally felt that it was time to take the journey, if you will, in spirit. I want to say that I want to reach out with all my love and all my heart to Michelle. I was with Tom as a partner for an extended period of time. He was, as she said, a beautiful, wonderful, intelligent being, as were all my classmates. And I hope that I want to reach out to all the other families, and I hope that there's an opportunity for those of us who left the group, and there is a network of about probably a dozen of us around the country, to meet with those parents and loved ones and begin the healing process.
When you first heard the news, did you know immediately it was your group?
Yes, I did. I felt it, and it didn't take very many details for me to be absolutely certain. I have the list in front of me of the individuals whose bodies have been identified, and I
don't know if you could read them because we're waiting until all families have been notified according to the medical
exam. I have no intention of reading them. And by the way, there are 5 copies of those tapes that have been sent by the class to specific ex-members, and there was a request that those tapes be shown, but now that I understand that it's the family's wish that they not be, then I will relay that message.
I see. Did you get one of the tapes?
No, I did not, but I know all the people who did.
Dick, we're going to be calling on you again next week, and thanks for joining us.
All right. Thank you.
Dick Jocelyn, former member of the cult, a friend of Thomas Nichols. When we come back, Dennis Rodman in studio, star of a new film, wrestling star, injured, great basketball. Go on and on. Dennis is next. Don't go away.
But the mystery of their commitment to bizarre notions of redemption by a UFO remains. Amid the grief of their families comes new information that the cult had more than one home base. CNN correspondent Rusty Dornan is covering the story and joins us live from Rancho Santa Fe, California. Rusty?
Well, Bob, that's true. The story continues to unfold from other parts of the country as we learn about their background and where they were before they came to Rancho Santa Fe. Apparently, they did have a 40-acre ranch in Manzano, New Mexico. Now, the San Diego Union is reporting that they lived in Army-like surplus tents, but they built a fortress-like structure built out of tires and cement in sand. Now, in that part of the country, that is not that uncommon. Tires are actually used for energy conservation in that part of the country. But apparently some books were discovered there that with titles like Earthship, How to Build One. They had indicated to the man who bought the property from them that there was some kind of revelation. They were building something for some kind of impending doom, but did not say what that was. And the man who bought the property from them, incidentally, was someone who was heading a Patriots movement in New Mexico. He shared many of their beliefs about a coming apocalypse. Now, one of the other interesting things that has been unfolding, of course, is the discovery that 6 of the members of Heaven's Gate were castrated. Many medical experts are wondering how this could happen. I mean, you cannot walk into a doctor's office and just ask for a castration. That could be done when someone is asking to change, when a man is asking for a sex change operation, that is performed. But you cannot walk into a doctor's office and ask for that kind of operation. That is not ethically done. So there are some questions as to when and where they were done and who did them. Whether it was one of the members who possibly had some medical background, we do not know. Speculation, of course, is that they did this to prove their dedication to their celibate life, to their monastic life, and also in emulation of their leader, Marshall Applewhite, who was one of the men who were castrated. Now, the Washington Post is reporting that there was an incident when he had a teaching position at St. Thomas University in Houston, that there was an alleged homosexual affair with one of his students, and that he was dismissed from that university for health problems of an emotional nature, and that he later, according to this report, turned himself into a psychiatric hospital. Now, we have also received statements from his son, Mark Applewhite, who is not going on interview with anyone, but has issued a statement saying that he is appalled at what his father did. He expresses sympathy to anyone who lost relatives and the horror of what happened. Apparently his son is a fundamentalist Christian. He did put in the statement that he feels he has a real ticket to heaven, not one of the ones that his father was disillusioned by. He also says that his father left when he was 5 years old and he had not heard from him for 25 years. And that's Mark Applewhite, the son of Marshall Applewhite, who was said to be the leader of Heaven's Gate. Now, most of the autopsies have been completed, although they say it will be Monday before the final results are in. Also, just a handful of families of the deceased have not been notified. Authorities are still trying to contact them. So the story continues to unfold as we learn more about the background, but still no answer to the major question of why. Bob?
All right, thank you. Rusty Dornan in Rancho Santa Fe today. For victims' families and friends, this weekend is filled with questions, filled with memories and emotions. David Talo had a friend who joined the cult in the 1970s and then dropped out and then went back to it a few years ago. David Talo joins us now by telephone from San Antonio. Mr. Talo, thanks for talking with us. Your friend was Jeff Lewis, is that right?
That is correct.
What can you tell us about him? How do you recall him?
Jeff was a very carefree, happy individual. He was a good friend of ours. I met him by going to a Wednesday happy hour on a regular basis at a reggae bar in San Antonio that was close to the medical center. He, at that time, was a masseuse. He had dreadlocks. He lived in a small apartment and had a very carefree, happy life. He would go to concerts, and as our friendship developed and the friendships in this little pub developed, we were going outside of the pub more and more to do camping and rafting and some of the stuff that you can do around San Antonio.
Mm-hmm. You knew him, Mr. Talo, after he had joined the cult and dropped out of it. Is that right?
That is correct. However, at no time up until he left did we really hear that much about the cult or what he had done. I don't have any real information on his early years other than
did he talk with you?
It was a bigger group of people.
Did he talk with you about the cult at all?
Yeah, right before he left. It was a quick transition. He went to see a friend of mine in Houston who he had evidently an interview to get back into the family, which is how he referred to these people. And he ended up telling my friend that give away all my stuff and go away. And he said, "You're kidding." "No, I'm really going to do this." And literally within 7 days of that, we were at his house. He had given away all his possessions. He had cut off all his hair. And he hugged us and said goodbye.
Were things going well for him at the time he made that decision to go back?
Yeah, from what I could see, I didn't see anything that was disturbing or anything that was really being a radical change in his life. I do think that this was something that built within himself, and he kept it to himself up until the time where he told all of us to.
Mr. Taylor, people ask themselves, ask each other constantly, what kind of person joins a cult like this, and winds up taking part in a mass suicide? How would you answer that question with regard to Mr. Lewis?
I don't think that there's a real pattern that I can suddenly reveal to everybody. Let me stress again that Jeff was a good friend. He was a wonderful person. He was a caring person. He, at the time, right before he did this, he lived in a back room of a house that was owned by an elderly lady, and he helped her with laundry and chores and made sure she was taken care of until she passed away.
Would you describe him as a passive person, more aggressive? How?
Excuse me?
What adjective would you use if I suggested he was passive? Would you say yes,
passive,
no?
Peaceful, happy, wonderful guy. Didn't want to hurt anybody. For a while, I believe he was very much into following the Grateful Dead tour for a year or so, and tried to live a very peaceful, love thy neighbor lifestyle. There was nothing in the way of aggression or hate that I ever saw in Jeff.
Okay. David Taylor, thank you very much for talking with us. Mr. Taylor, a friend of one of the people who committed suicide in Rancho Santa Fe, Jeff Lewis. We are continuing to cover the story, and as developments evolve, we'll continue to bring them to you. 2 people are confirmed dead. Sometime before moving to a San Diego mansion, the cult established a compound in the New Mexico mountains, complete with tents and fortress-like reinforcements. Also, California officials report that some of the 18 men who died, including cult leader Marshall Applewhite, had been castrated sometime before their suicides. 21 of the 39 victims were women, including a woman whose mother insists she was coerced.
Had a little business out in California on her own, and the business wasn't doing well. We believe that the group told her to close out and come with them. And she had a boyfriend out there, and they had split. So she was in a down part of her life. I just want everybody out there to know that these people were the victims. They weren't to blame. Applewhite was to blame. They were like lambs being led to the slaughter. And in no way would Gail have taken her own life if she wasn't in that state, in a brainwashed state.
The Heaven's Gate cult apparently believed that in death they would be redeemed by a UFO riding near the comet Hale-Bopp. Could your car's airbag go off?
This group, but it's actually fairly typical of many of the kinds of groups that I've been studying for the last few years on and off the internet. We have here a rather odd blend of apocalyptic Christianity, UFO beliefs, conspiracy theories, and technology. And, this is blending together in a kind of melange, which I think is characteristic of new religious movements as we approach the year 2000.
Among the more bizarre revelations, old tires. The San Diego Union Tribune reports the group had a 40-acre compound in Manzano, New Mexico, on the high plains south of Albuquerque. Reportedly, the site was sold last April to the leader of a grassroots patriot group long before the cult's building plans were completed. It's a far cry from the suburban San Diego mansion where 39 cult members poisoned and/or suffocated themselves over the past week. Authorities now say some of the male cult members have been castrated, but how and why remain mysteries. President Clinton wants Americans this weekend in connection with my father. On this Easter weekend, President Clinton,
up in just a moment. Don't go away.
One of the cult members told her mother last November that the group was preparing to, in her words, leave the country. Also, the San Diego Union Tribune reports that the group sold an isolated compound reinforced with concrete and tires last April in New Mexico. Authorities have revealed some of the men in the group were castrated, including the group's leader, Marshall Applewhite. President Clinton is asking the nation to take a moment this Easter weekend to...
Religion, one part science fiction. This group, since October, have been calling out to followers around the world to join them in leaving this world in a spaceship. And it was all out there on the web at www.heavensgate.com. For a time, the busiest site on the World Wide Web may have been Heaven's Gate, the website designed by and for the followers of the 39 men and women found dead outside San Diego. It reveals a fascination with Jesus, in whose footsteps their leader believed he was following, an abiding concern that the end of the millennium will bring a spading under of the world in preparation for a future human civilization, and a belief that Earth's current celestial visitor, Comet Hale-Bopp, is the marker the group has been waiting for. Arriving with Hale-Bopp, the group believed would be a spaceship. The time for the arrival of the spacecraft from the level above human to take us home to their world in the literal heavens. Before their apparent suicides, the 39 men and women earned a livelihood as successful website developers. One of their customers, the San Diego Polo Club, which hired them for the complex task of creating a homepage on the World Wide Web.
Their demeanor and their personal appearance was a little bit odd. You know, they all had buzz haircuts, and the dress was a little bit strange or a little bit odd for making a business presentation. But once we got over that hurdle and got to know them, very genuine people and very talented in their craft.
The group promoted its business with a second web page called Higher Source. It resembles many other professional web pages out there on the internet, nothing revealing the group's private religious agenda. Some might ask, if the authorities had been paying attention to these web writings, could 39 lives have been saved? Well, with all
files at the group's mansion in the San Diego suburb of Rancho Santa Fe. Authorities say the 39 cult members overdosed and suffocated. They apparently used a large amount of barbiturates. San Diego Union Tribune reports that before moving to California, Heaven's Gate cult members lived like monks high in the New Mexico hills. The compound south of Albuquerque was built of old tires, dirt, concrete. A former member of the cult talked about his experiences and why he left.
I got disillusioned. They claimed that they were going to be assassinated or killed violently, him and Herbo and Peep. And within a few months of my joining, so I think I had a subconscious time clock ticking that said after 4 or 5 months, maybe this isn't as real as I thought. Mm-hmm. Plus, I stayed with some people in Arizona who were living a wonderful life, raising their children with love and compassion, and being kind and generous. And I realized, well, maybe that's my answer, that why we're here is to just be good, loving people on the planet and helping people.
Heaven's Gate leader Marshall Applewhite led his followers to suicide with pledges of a spaceship ride to the next kingdom. Applewhite and several cult members had been castrated. In a letter, Applewhite's estranged son writes, "I would like everyone to know that the strange bent that my father went off on has not been passed on to his family." Iran is denying a newspaper report.
In Post reports, cult leader Marshall Applewhite began organizing the group in the 1970s after being fired from a Houston college for having an affair with a male student. As CNN talks to relatives of Heaven's Gate members, estrangement has become a common theme.
They made it a point that we wouldn't know where they were. That was the thing. We couldn't contact them. We just had to wait till she contacted us. That's why I was so afraid that if they did something, we wouldn't even know they were gone. That's why I was so relieved every time she called. Yes, they chose to isolate them from family so they wouldn't, couldn't influence.
Meanwhile, a San Diego newspaper reports cult members had previously lived in New Mexico in a compound made of old tires and concrete. In his weekly radio address, President Clinton asked Americans that have resulted from the actions of my father and others in that cult. "I am deeply hurt by the knowledge that people have now lost their lives in connection with my father." His father, Marshall Applewhite, is believed to have persuaded 38 men and women to kill themselves in the belief that a spaceship would take them to another existence. A mother of one of the women says if not for Applewhite, her daughter would still be alive.
I just want everybody out there to know that these people were the victims. They weren't to blame. Applewhite was to blame. They were like lambs being led to the slaughter. And in no way would Gail have taken her own life if she wasn't in that state, in a brainwashed state.
More autopsies are being performed.
For one. CNN's Jim Hill is following the story, and he joins us live from San Diego, California, with more and the very latest on the story. Jim?
Well, Bill, the autopsies are continuing right on through the weekend here at the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office. Also, authorities continue to work through the weekend, notifying the families of the suicide victims. So far, in excess of 30 families have been notified. Many of them, of course, are on their way to San Diego now. Some of them arrived today. As a matter of fact, we saw 3 carloads come into the medical examiner's office, the morgue, if you will. One man came in a short time ago in his car. He was typical, drove up to the gate, said simply to the guard, "I'm here to identify the body of my son." CNN's Rusty Dornan has more.
For some families of cult members, the visit to the morgue was the first contact with their loved ones in years. The family of Erica Ernst were on vacation when they saw reports of the mass suicide on television. Now they're in San Diego to pick up her body.
For 21 years I tried to find her, but he couldn't find her.
The family of Gail Nader saw their daughter for the first time in 3 years on videotape, where she told the world goodbye.
A lot old. I didn't recognize her at first until she opened her mouth to speak. I thought she was a 40-year-old person. She had black circles around her eyes. She looked worn. I don't know. It wasn't Gail. You know, Gail was always smiling, upbeat, you know, and this wasn't Gail, this very passive sitting here. I'm very happy to be here.
As more bizarre details unfolded about Marshall Applewhite, the group's leader, his son Mark released a statement claiming he has not seen his father in 25 years. "I am appalled by the things that have resulted from the actions of my father and others in that cult. I am deeply hurt by the knowledge that people have now lost their lives in connection with my father." Before their arrival in California, there are reports the Heaven's Gate cult lived here on a ranch in New Mexico. According to the San Diego Union, they built a so-called Earthship out of tires and cement. They never finished it. They abandoned the fortress-like structure before it could be completed. An obsession with UFOs and all things in outer space. Obsessions that some families hoped and prayed would someday just go away.
All we can rely on is that she will wake up and say, "I've had enough." Because we've been told over and over that 9 out of every 10 come out. They may not be when you want them to, but she would be home.
One of 39 homecomings never realized. Rusty Dornan, CNN, San Diego, California.
Of course, it becomes more and more obvious, as we heard from Rusty's report, that these people led a very bizarre lifestyle, had some very bizarre beliefs. But of course, what is still somewhat of a mystery is why they actually went so far, all 39 of them, to actually take their own lives. And at this point, people in the medical examiner's office say that's exactly what happened. They have found absolutely no evidence that anyone was killed. Apparently, all of these were, in fact, suicides. Back to you.
Okay, Jim Hill live this morning from, live tonight, rather, from San Diego, California. Thanks, Jim. Gene?
Palestinian leaders say there's no reason to talk.
This is coming in as a mosaic. And one of them is the whole business of the Star Trek thing. You know, the people are so enamored of all of those kind of movies and television shows and have gotten very turned on by them, even elderly people, a great range of people. And this is somehow in the mix, that they lose their sense of reality, so that some of them almost think that what was going on there in those movies was somehow possible. So they can even imagine that beyond the comet, there's a spaceship hiding, waiting, and even so that Hale had to come on. And I saw him on television yesterday saying, if you put a telescope out there, you will not see any spaceship going around the corner of my comet. But that's part of the whole madness of the whole thing. But one of the things we need to see at the same time, I'm convinced, and I agree with my colleagues entirely about this strategy, but one of the other things is the massive alienation and disaffection with the way many things are going in society today, the total technologizing of society, which is exciting to some of them, but in others there's a real feeling that they can't fight it. They want to get away from it. They either want to commit suicide or go to a spaceship or start a massive political movement like the militia.
People look for the hidden hand in history, you know, what's going on behind the scenes. Who's pulling it? The Illuminati, the Templars, the International Jewish Conspiracy, and that connects these things together, because you're constantly trying to explain what's happening. And so maybe it's from space. You know, this far-right movement, for example, some of those people believe actually that it was a battle between God and his son in space. And so
The thing that is amazing to me is that whether you're talking about San Diego or Om Shinrikyo in Japan or here in the United States, they're not poor, desperate people. These are sophisticated in many cases. They have jobs, and I don't understand what is the motivation to take that step to bombings and taking pills.
But if you look throughout history, I mean, people have always had the ability, I don't think anybody knows why, but to divide up, classify somebody as other, and then you're fighting this good versus evil battle for survival. Sometimes, you know, it's totally lunatic in terms of the ideologies.
But still,
but people have always respected them.
Jim, I'm going to give you the last word.
No, I think that's it. I mean, I think it is a search for what makes us tick. It's the hidden hand, and it's made everybody from whatever political side you come from. You know, that's the quest.
Attractive and destructive in equal measure. Ken, James, and Professor Bader, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Coming up on Edgewise, faith meets...
Believe in. The militia movement also mixes racial supremacy with Christianity rather freely. And one of the things that I discovered in the course of working on this book, which is about something seemingly very different, the search for the historical Jesus, is that that's going on everywhere today. People are sort of, it's do-it-yourself theology, you know, whether it's crystals and channeling or whether it's people going into Pentecostal churches to try to connect in an individual way with higher truth rather than sort of accepting the faith that their parents sort of bequeathed to them. And I think that's what's going on here, too. It's people are trying to find ways of mixing sort of what science and reason and rationalism tells us is true with the traditional religious perspective.
So when you talk about, and this book is focused on, the search for a historically accurate biographical Jesus, what is it that you find, and what stories in the Bible does it either prove or disprove?
Okay, what is it you find? First of all, let me just explain that what I tried to do was take seriously this vast scholarly enterprise that's going on, and embrace as much of it as I could, the liberal and conservative interpretations, Christian and non-Christian, and try to sort of see where the circles intersect and say, okay, for now, let's say that is where science and history, that's where they put it. The knowledge of this historical figure. Then I stepped back from that. So I told the story, which I'll answer your question in a minute.
Birthday.
Well, 5 BC,
right,
or thereabouts. At least one of at least 7 children.
7 children.
Yeah, born and raised.
What must it have been like to have been Jesus' brother?
Well, that's
a mystery. Right? A mystery.
Born and raised in Nazareth, small village in the hills of Galilee.
Rabbi, carpenter?
His father was presumably not so much a carpenter, but something more like an unskilled laborer who would wander around the construction sites looking for work. He may have followed him in his trade. There was a city, a Roman-controlled, very cosmopolitan city, literally within sight of Nazareth, where Greek was the language. It was there were banks and law courts, and it's a very different notion of what his world was like when you look at it in those terms.
But he was a city boy with a...
Well, he was a country boy, but the city was right there, in other words. Sure. So just to complete the portrait, sometime around 28 CE, or when he was in his early 30s, he goes south to Judea, to the desert around the Jordan, where a prophet named John baptizes him. He becomes a disciple of his for a time.
Who was a really famous guy.
Who was a very famous, and I think most scholars would say that John was something like a celebrity at the time. Whereas
would have
Jesus,
had a talk show today.
May have. And Jesus didn't reach that kind of level of fame.
In his lifetime?
Perhaps not. So that he becomes a follower of his. According to one theory, in fact, he then leaves John and starts doing his own baptizing. In other words, he's preaching basically John's message. But then, presumably, something happens. He starts to talk about his own notion of things, as opposed to the sort of repent or die fairly straight riff that John gives you. He develops something much more subtle and complex. He starts talking about the kingdom of God. He says it's within you, but it's spread out on the earth, and yet at other times he says that it's coming.
This reaches the attention of the Romans, who eventually arrest him.
And in about 30
BCE. He causes a disturbance in the temple in Jerusalem, and some combination of Roman and Jewish authorities put him to death.
So how does history handle the resurrection then?
That's a good question. I think that gets to the heart of this whole intersection of science versus religion, because the real issue there, it seems to me, is what do you mean by resurrection? Is it a bodily resurrection you're talking about or not? I think a lot of people today would say, well, what's it matter? If the spiritual experience, say the disciples had a spiritual experience with him after death, fine. Well, traditional Christianity doesn't say so. Starting in the 2nd century, the church father Tertullian says, no, Christian faith is in the body, suffused with blood, scaffolded of bones. That's what came back. And so that's the traditional notion. One of the things that I discovered in the course of researching the book is that there are an awful lot of Christian ministers who don't believe that, who don't think that that's what they have to believe in order to be Christian.
That's very interesting. Our conversation on the search for historical Jesus and what it means will continue when Edgewise returns.
Hired the cult members to design web pages for the San Diego Polo Club. Like others we spoke to, they described the cult as bright and devoted to computers.
One day they came in and Stuart said to me, you know, we did a website for Madonna. And I said, you did? He said, yeah, it was a long time ago. But he was pretty proud of that.
What do computers reveal about the cult? The group's own website offers clues to one of their biggest mysteries. Why now? What does it possibly have to do with the arrival of the Hale-Bopp comet, now streaking past Earth? Comets have long held humans enraptured. The appearance of comets were believed to signal the birth of Julius Caesar, the fall of Jerusalem, even the rise of Attila the Hun, and often a suggestion of the end of the world.
Welcome to Beyond Human, the last call.
Back at Heaven's Gate, their leader watched comets too. He was called Doe. His real name was Marshall Applewhite. Here Doe is seen in a 5-year-old recruitment tape. On the cult's website, Doe calls Hale-Bopp a sign that the spacecraft from the level above human has come to take them home.
The comet is a common apocalyptic or end-of-the-world sign. Whenever comets appear, you do get military groups who begin to take some kinds of action.
And how would cult members get home, as they called it? They made these drawings, for one thing. And on the internet the past few weeks, there's been talk that this small light just off to the side of Hale-Bopp was actually an alien spaceship. Once on board, Heaven's Gate members believed they would join their leader's dead female companion, called T.
T, my partner, who has returned to the kingdom of heaven.
And why does the website have a page against suicide? Well, when you read it, it actually says it's suicide to stay on Earth, which says the page will crumble as soon as the millennium ends.
And Hale-Bopp was a nice little sign that came along to say, here's your signal, that's your 1,000 years.
That nourishes speculation at the time. It's clear that the world that they were leaving was going to be destroyed. And there was only one way to live, and that was to get out of it.
How could such supposedly smart people fall for that? Could it be that over the years they surrendered their individuality, stopped thinking on their own?
Somebody on the other side of this camera watching this tape would probably say, what's going on? You know, you all must not have a life, or you're deluded, or you're brainwashed, or whatever the thinking might be. It's hard to convince it. From our perspective, from my perspective, this is God thing. I mean, this is the answer to everything.
Could the way they looked be part of that?
They had very short haircuts. The women had very short hair. The men sometimes had buzzes. A couple of them were bald.
Asexual, androgynous, everyone looked alike. Police, remember, first reported all the dead were young men.
Our older member gave...
Was it a form of purification, a way to get ready for the next world?
Sex being the one that seemed to stand out the most, that people seem to be so addicted to.
They're essentially asexuals and lived a life of celibacy. And I was also informed that some of the men had their testicles removed.
That's extreme.
That's very extreme.
Tonight, the medical examiner confirmed that some of the men were castrated.
And I don't have any idea what the reason for that was.
But the student of cults knew it was part of a strange tradition.
Well, paradise is supposed to be a sexless place. You had a huge Russian cult called the Skopsy, in which the men all castrated themselves and the women cut off their breasts in order to prove that they were able to lead a sexless existence.
Was it that kind of tight control over the lives of Heaven's Gate members that prevented these people from stepping back and away from what they were about to do to themselves?
I think it's bizarre and kind of scary that people can fall so far into their belief system that they'd be willing to take their own lives.
They never hid their strange otherworldly notions. Their plans were loud and clear, the course apparently certain. So how are they allowed to go through with it? Why were they ignored? And could anyone have stopped them? We are used to cults trying to hide from the world in remote places like Waco, Texas. But in one of the most bizarre twists of this very bizarre story, it turns out this group did not hide like other cults. Far from it. Why hadn't anyone picked up the clues sprinkled so liberally in the cult's very own recruitment videos?
Now, the end of the age, I'm afraid I feel is right upon us.
But no one seemed to worry about this. Why? And why hadn't anyone paid closer attention to this very prominent article from 1976 describing the group as a UFO cult? Had everyone simply forgotten this? A 1982 TV movie aired on NBC about the cult's leaders, then called Bo and Peep, or The Two, depicting what would become the group's suicidal intentions.
We are travelers, friend, and this is our point of embarkation.
The movie was based on a book about the cult, published by Simon & Schuster, one of the biggest book companies in the world. Didn't anyone pay attention? Why didn't anyone hear the alarm bells? Could anyone have done anything? For one thing, the cult apparently never broke the law.
We, as a department, have never been to the residence, nor have these people ever attracted the attention of our department. Nothing we have learned or seen so far indicates that there were any kind of criminal activity.
Unlike Waco, Heaven's Gate didn't stockpile weapons, they just stockpiled software. And cult experts will tell you if you're over 18 and abide by the law, cult members are protected from anyone trying to save them from themselves. And because they didn't seem dangerous, people didn't overreact. Why should they?
They informed me that they were space aliens. But they also refer to themselves as angels.
But when they said this to you, maybe for shock value, were you shocked?
I kind of got a kick out of it, to be honest with you. And the other thing that's interesting about them is they're fully willing to laugh at themselves.
Well, we're still here. We're not alone.
Laughing at themselves. Was that the way they slipped through? By pretending, unlike Jim Jones or David Koresh, to be in on the joke. Did Heaven's Gate hide in plain sight? Did they figure out that in modern America, the best way to get lost is to get lost in a crowd of TV movies, books, videos, the internet, and even news shows? The crowd of media that comes and goes every day of our lives.
46-year-old male from Texas, 54 female from New Mexico.
They have taken their answers with them. Is that what they wanted? To keep us guessing, poring over puzzling clues, and to keep us talking seriously, finally very seriously, about a thing called Heaven's Gate.
29-year-old male from Utah, 39-year-old female from Ohio, 45-year-old female from Arizona, 55-year-old female from Texas, 59-year-old male from Arizona.
As with any major developing story, Dateline will be providing continuing coverage in the days ahead. We'll be exploring various aspects of the cult story on our regular edition.
Dateline this week with reports this hour from John Larson, Bob McEwen, and Keith Morrison.
Victims have begun recovering the bodies of their loved ones. The son of the founder of the Heaven's Gate group apologized for his father's connection to Wednesday's mass suicide. And as we learn more about the Heaven's Gate group, we're also learning more about the individual people involved in that. Here's a look at how one family is coping with the loss of a loved one in this very puzzling tragedy.
We didn't know she was in this cult or in any... We didn't know what she was doing. We didn't know if she was dead or alive.
The only thing we got was a postcard every 6 months or so, and we could read the postmark. That was the only way we could track her.
We just got this flyer in the mail in September. It was on a cult recruiting flyer for this UFO cult called something like Above Human Level and all this. And they were promising on this that if you wanted to join, you would go to heaven by way of a spaceship. You would be, your temple, your body would be cleansed to be reincarnated by an alien, and you would never know death. That's, after analyzing it through my own head, I think this is what got her, the promise that she was never going to die.
What are you going to do? You can't pull her out of there. You know, she's of age. You can do what she wants. It's kidnapping if you go in there with force. It wouldn't have done any good.
No.
Our only hope was that one day she'd wake up in the morning and say, what in the hell am I doing here? I'm getting out and come home. She said that in all the letters, every note we ever got, she said how happy she was.
Yeah, she'd say, I pray you don't worry about me. I'm healthy and happy and have everything I want. And I thought, wow, you know. And I said to Bobby, she prays we don't worry about her? What does she think we do? Of course we're worried about her. She was like a fatal disease. It happened to her, and she didn't plan it. She didn't maliciously go out of her way to hurt anybody. She is the victim in this.
Mr. Renner, how would you like your daughter to be remembered?
Oh, that nice little girl I used to have. Unbelievable.
When the World Today continues, the inevitable comparison between the mass suicide in California and the Jonestown, Guyana massacre of the 1970s. We'll talk to a man who visited Jonestown. Journalist Charles Krause joins us to talk about this new cult case and the previous one when we come back.
These were all Americans, people brought there, some allegedly against their will, his followers. And that is where this tragedy took place.
You saw Jonestown. Give us your impressions quickly.
Well, we went in there with the congressman. I was a journalist with the Washington Post at that time. We went in with Congressman Ryan, who was from California, who had heard the allegations of torture and other abuses. We flew into Jonestown. There was an airstrip about 4 miles away in Port Kaituma. It was a jungle camp, close to 950 Americans living there. The conditions were not that bad considering where it was. They had built buildings out of wood. They had made a life, a camp there where they were all living, children, from infants to older people. All of them were there in the jungle.
And then there was the ambush at the airport. The congressman was killed. You were wounded. And shortly after that, the suicide in Jonestown. How many people were killed?
Close to 950 people.
What parallels do you see between the Jonestown experience and what happened in California?
Well, I think that obviously both of these groups were formed and led by men who had an appeal to their followers. These were charismatic leaders. They attracted people to them through a variety of means, apparently, certainly in Jonestown's case, in the People's Temple's case. Jones had a magnetic personality. That was apparent even at the end. And these people, the people that he brought into that group, were people who were looking for a better life on Earth. The people who apparently joined with Mr. Applewhite in Heaven's Gate were drawn in, probably for some of the same reasons, but were apparently looking for something beyond this Earth, this world we live in.
So the philosophies were very different.
The philosophies certainly were different. Jim Jones preached against racism. He brought blacks and whites together. It was an idealist. It was a commune, in effect, whereas Mr. Applewhite's group clearly had a millennialist appeal, as we know now, an appeal to people looking for something beyond the here and now.
Were the reasons for the suicides different?
Apparently so. I mean, certainly Jones, by the end, had become very paranoid and certainly psychotic. And imagine that Congressman Ryan and the group of journalists who were with him were there. He, in his own mind, apparently, we were enemies who were going to destroy his world, this community, this authoritarian community that he had built in the jungle. It had nothing to do with going on to some greater place, some greater good, something like that. These people died there in the jungle, and that was it. Obviously, Heaven's Gate, shedding their skins, as they said, or their vessels, was something entirely different.
In California, they apparently all were suicides. That was not the case in Jonestown, was it?
No. We called it a mass suicide murder because it is obvious, it is known from a tape that was recorded the last hours of Jonestown. People did protest. People did not want to drink the poison. There, in fact, were people with guns forcing people to take poison, those who resisted. And in fact, the people with the guns, a number of them, may well have survived because there were survivors from Jonestown, whereas that is not the case in California.
Did Jones force his followers to sever connections with their families the way Applewhite apparently did?
Yes, there was much of the same modus operandi, if you will. People were separated from their families. Both of these groups seemed to, they demanded a severing of those ties, a kind of isolation that made it much more difficult, certainly for the people in Jonestown, probably for the people in the Heaven's Gate community, to leave. It became virtually impossible. They had nowhere to go. They had completely severed all ties, and that was very much a part of the doctrine. Both of these gentlemen also demanded total loyalty. Certainly Jones did, and there were tests all of the time of their loyalty to make sure that there was no one who was thinking differently, who might object to the general direction of things.
What do you think are the most significant differences and distinctions between these two events?
I think that certainly the theology of the two groups was different. I mean, that is obvious. We don't know enough yet, I don't think, about the reasons why. I mean, the tapes are there. We know what Heaven's Gate, what these people were saying. One thing that I personally observed and remembered thinking about at Jonestown, there was a woman on one of these tapes from Heaven's Gate who started crying, and there was some snickering from the people off camera. And it struck me that that woman had some doubts, that this notion that all of the people from Heaven's Gate were going to willingly commit suicide, that raised questions in my mind. And I was reminded of the people I met in Jonestown just hours before they all took the poison, people who put up a very good front, people who convinced me, even as I was leaving that place, that they basically were happy there, that they basically wanted to stay there, that they really did not want to leave. And yet those same people, I heard them on those tapes saying that they shouldn't do this. And I had to wonder whether all of the people, especially that woman who was crying, whether she really wanted to go along with this Heaven's Gate suicide.
And we have to leave it there. Charles Krause, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Bill?
On a related note, join CNN.
The 39 cult members who killed themselves Wednesday are finding out the terrible news that their loved ones were among the dead in that California hilltop mansion. Channel 7's Kathy Walsh reports the mourning tonight is as much for lost time as it is for the loss of life.
Dear Mom and Dad, just a little note wishing everyone there the best. I think my choices in life might puzzle you at times, but I really want you to be aware that I'm doing exactly what I want to, and it makes me very happy.
Alice Meter got a few letters over the years from her daughter. This one was the first hint that Gail was leading a bizarre life.
It's impossible to believe. I still don't believe it.
Gail was a typical kid growing up on Long Island, New York, until 1990, when she moved to California with a boyfriend. Her parents last saw her at this family wedding in 1993. Nothing seemed strange, but then the letters came and Gail dropped out of sight.
For 21 years I tried to find her, but he couldn't find her.
Edward Ernst heard about the mass suicide on television, and arrived in San Diego from Canada to pick up his daughter's body. Erica did not keep in touch at all after joining the cult.
She had 5 children from the ages of 19 to 7 months old.
In Cincinnati, Yvonne McCurdy Hill left her kids behind and headed west. That was last August. She found out about the cult on the internet. She has relatives in Detroit.
It seems to always cause all of the people in the periphery of your life to turn against you. Think that you've lost your marbles.
The leader of the cult, Marshall Applewhite, was a music teacher and father before starting the group 20 years ago. He traveled the country looking for new members who believed he was a space alien, who would deliver them to the heavenly kingdom. And even he leaves behind a relative who wished for a homecoming that would never happen.
He was always a born leader and very charismatic. He could get people to believe anything.
Almost all of the cult members' families are having their loved ones cremated and sent back home. Most of the victims had left their families' lives long before they took their own. Mike?
Thanks, Kath. Tragic story. There's a report from the Washington Post that the group's leader, Marshall Applewhite, apparently was fired from a Texas university for having an affair with a male student. Well, the president of the University of St. Thomas denies that report. Back in town, 2 men are behind bars tonight after pulling off another jewelry heist.
5 cult members showed up at the Nettles Houston home with her photograph, but no body or death certificate.
When I found out that Herb Applewhite was associated with this mass suicide, I was wondering if my mother's body was going to show up in this.
Bonnie Nettles' body was not found with those who committed suicide. Still, Joe says he understands what the other grieving relatives are going through. So here's the bottom line. The McCurdy family is waiting to hear when the body of Yvonne McCurdy will return home so they can make funeral arrangements. Meanwhile, police are looking through the cult's computers for clues that will help them better understand the reason for the mass suicide. And investigators are also looking into the cult's finances.
Residents in Wyandotte awoke to gunshots.
It is so bizarre, it prompted astronomer Alan Hale, who co-discovered the comet, to publicly remind people it's just a comet. As he said, a dirty snowball orbiting the sun. Jim Hill, CNN, San Diego, California.
We'll have more on the mass suicide story on CNN Impact. That's Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. In the
The individual and the cult itself becomes something of a closed system that becomes self-sustaining and self-perpetuating in a way that traditional mainline religions have been able to interact with the culture outside of their particular tradition in one way or another.
And one of the traditions, what religion traditions demand is that people ultimately go to the outside world. And what you get from your religious belief is hopefully some way in which you can translate this into reaction with the world, so that you will wind up doing what we call in the Jewish tradition mitzvah, fulfill the commandments, doing good deeds. And that is often lacking in terms of the cult, where everything becomes so self-contained that people are concerned about one another.
In light of the event that we've just all experienced, what do you have any final words that you would like to say before we leave?
Oh, yes, I'd like to say
quickly.
Okay. Just like to say, I think that one of the lessons from this experience is it's very dangerous once you become such a self-contained entity that you no longer interact with the world, can be critiqued as well as be a critic of it.
I think the rabbinic tradition, which tells us that when the temple was destroyed, prophecy's been relegated to fools and to asses, really tells us that you ought not to trust any one person who will come and tell you this is the way in which you can reach heaven, and this is the way in which you can somehow or another move from one stage of life to another.
Rade Arnold Goodman, Reverend Coleman, thank you very much for joining us this morning, giving us your insight on both. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for more in-depth coverage of the cult suicide, please tune in to CNN Impact tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Among other things, it will feature an in-depth interview with the daughter of Bonnie Lou Nettles, that is the late co-founder of the Heaven's Gate culture. And when CNN Sunday Morning continues, a look at some women.
Meanwhile, back at the mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, the FBI arrived. The mansion's owner also returned to assist authorities in the investigation. Also on Saturday, personnel from the coroner's department carefully went through cult members' belongings. And today, Mark Applewhite, the cult leader's son, issued a public apology to the families who lost loved ones in the mass suicide. In San Diego, Saida Pagan, Fox News.
The first defendant in the Oklahoma City bombing case may already be at the courthouse where his trial will take place.
Marshall Applewhite led his followers to believe that he was suffering from liver cancer. And apparently his followers felt that they would rather die along with him than face the world without their leader. We have a quote now from one of the computer discs. This is a quote written by a female cult member. "Once he is gone," meaning Applewhite, "there is nothing left here on the face of the earth for me. No reason to stay a moment longer." Now, according to the Associated Press, the chief medical examiner here in San Diego County has said that there is no visible evidence from the autopsy that Applewhite actually had cancer of any kind. So at this point, it would appear that Applewhite simply told his followers this, that he lied to them essentially, and that may have been a factor in the mass suicide. Meanwhile, all around the nation this Easter Sunday, churches are including in their messages and their sermons some concerns about the mass suicides and about some cult activities in general.
The Jim Jones, the David Koreshes, and the Marshall Applewhite messiahs always take others with them to the grave. Jesus Christ went alone and came back victorious over it.
The county medical examiner's office here in San Diego expects a news conference perhaps sometime tomorrow, at which we'll get some on-the-record confirmation and additional details, I suppose, on the autopsy findings. But once again, the autopsies themselves had
developed a double life. Charles Rosecrans is a former friend.
Well, as far as I knew, he was gay. I mean, how public he was about it. I mean, I don't know. I don't think he was walking around with a badge with a G on it or anything like that.
Some friends from the 60s say Applewhite was going through a sexual identity crisis, an inner conflict that would later lead to bizarre actions.
And I found him, frankly, ever so slightly off-center.
But in Houston in the mid-60s, his career was going well. He was a music professor at the University of St. Thomas, a featured singer at the Houston Grand Opera. He even appeared twice with Placido Domingo. And he was a passionate choir director. Sylvia Froman acted with him in musicals.
He had great training to be a cult leader. All these people laid out before you, and you want to get something, you want to draw something from them.
And then, rather suddenly, he
sort of went off the deep end, and nobody knows why.
Published reports say he was fired from his job at the University of St. Thomas for a homosexual affair with a student. The then president of the school denies it. Father Patrick Braden told Dateline Applewhite was, quote, not mentally well, and that's why he left by mutual consent.
As far as I was concerned, he simply vanished.
Some news reports have him in this Houston hospital, but the daughter of the woman who would change his life says Applewhite and Bonnie Lou Nettles had their fateful meeting at a theater. It was 1972. Applewhite was just past 40 and had finally found a soulmate. Bonnie Lou taught him about UFOs and astrology. Together they headed in a new direction. Minister's son, rejecting traditional religion, conflicted homosexual, rejecting sex. They decided their asexual souls would be whisked off to eternity in a UFO. They also decided they were the modern equivalents of Christ. They came to this very street in the Hollywood Hills where a house party had been arranged, where 80 people, friends of friends, could hear what they had to say.
Curiosity has driven me all of my life. Weird turns me on. What can I tell you?
Her name is Joan Culpepper. Weird might turn her on. But that night, among her friends in the Hollywood Hills, she was scared.
They had a very hardcore philosophy. If you want to get off the planet, you come with us. That UFO will be waiting for you when we die and resurrect. And the way to get there is to, right now, tonight, give everything up and leave.
Right now, tonight.
Right. It was pretty incredible to me. And when that meeting was over that night, these people that I've known for a very long time are telling me, I'm going.
Back then, they called themselves Guinea and Pig, says Culpepper, as in God's experimental guinea pig. Culpepper reported the newly formed cult to the authorities. The cult called her Judas.
I got a giggle out of it. Part of me is saying, well, good. I'm glad, because I really do feel like that. I want to betray you guys.
The law in California couldn't do anything. The members were acting of their own free will, and the little flock went on its way, advertising its meetings, promising that UFOs would take them to their so-called higher level. And they might have simply faded away were it not for a strange trip to Oregon and the sudden disappearance of 20 people.
Nobody knows if they are earthly hoaxers or Pied Pipers from outer space. But
it was October 1975, the tiny hamlet of Waldport, Oregon.
Robert Rubin sold his interest in some rundown houses and 10 acres of land to a friend for $1.
And those 20 people abandoned all they knew, all they had, and simply vanished. Robert Rubin was one of them.
I happened to own a bunch of rental houses, so I gave them up, my musical instruments, and whatever I had. I just left it behind, packed up, and went.
But the families of cult members were terrified. Cult watcher Priscilla Coates.
Their loved ones were missing. They had no idea where they were. They knew they had joined this group, but that was all they knew.
Even 20 years ago, some experts sensed the danger. One psychiatrist who was keeping track told Dateline that Applewhite was a classic paranoid personality, and the cult's behavior grew more bizarre. Because Applewhite couldn't have sex, no one would have sex. He had himself castrated, and several of his followers did the same.
Possibly he didn't have the willpower or the strength to deal with his sexuality, and he felt that that was the only way he could do it, and maybe that's why the others did it.
That's a power that is overwhelming to me. You really have total control when you can get a man to undergo castration for you.
Sensing that outsiders were getting suspicious, by 1976 the cult went underground. They stayed out of the news for 17 years, moving around the West. Places like this encampment they built in New Mexico. It was supposed to be a landing field for UFOs.
My partner, who has returned to the kingdom of heaven.
Applewhite was deeply affected by the death of longtime partner Nettles. Sources say she died of cancer in 1985, but no UFO ever arrived to take her. A few years later, perhaps as Applewhite saw his own mortality, the group surfaced again, holding meetings around the country, winning a few followers. No more begging. Now the well-educated group saw money in computers. And the teachings had changed. Applewhite now saw suicide as the way to bring on the UFOs. Applewhite posted messages on the internet about the comet Hale-Bopp, that it was a signal to leave this world. But Joan Culpepper, for one, just isn't buying it.
I believe that the man was ill, possibly terminally, that he began very subtly over a period of time to restructure the thinking.
Widely reported rumors that Applewhite suffered from terminal liver cancer were refuted this afternoon. The medical examiner reporting he showed no sign of the disease. But remember, when he thought sex was wrong, he had others follow him to castration. And if Applewhite even thought he was dying, as several cult experts have told Dateline, he probably would have wanted his flock to follow him into death as well. Like Jim Jones and David Koresh. Like so many facets of this bizarre story, we may never really know.
Your only chance to evacuate is to leave with us.
NBC News, of course, will be staying on top of this story. We'll keep you up to date with the latest developments in this case.
This is Dateline Sunday for March 30th, with reports tonight from Chief Consumer Correspondent Lee Thompson, Dawn Fratangelo, Chris Hansen, Dennis Murphy, and Keith Morrison. Still ahead, what did they really believe?
We went on special diets. We tried to purify our thoughts. We weren't sexual. We were celibate.
Inside the mind of someone who's been there.
By the way, a spokesperson for Glenn Campbell told us Campbell denies knocking out Tanya's front teeth.
Their lives and their message. So we wanted to ask, what did they really believe and why did they believe it? We got some answers from someone who understands who these people were, because he was one of them. Here's Dawn Fratangelo.
I couldn't have had a better life than I've had these 21 years. And if it was good here, I know it's going to be twice as good when I get up there. and we're looking forward to it.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, this is Glenn, and this is Star. My goodness, they all have white hair.
We have a picture.
I didn't realize it'd been that long since I'd seen them.
For Dick Jocelyn, the videotapes that are haunting America are more like a family album.
This is a very joyous time for the class to be able to be returning home.
For 15 years, Jocelyn was a member of Heaven's Gate. He's one of the few people still alive who can say he truly understands why 39 people took their lives for reasons many of us find incomprehensible.
Why did they commit suicide?
It was the best way that they knew how to accomplish the joining with the kingdom of heaven that they so deeply desired. They were warm, friendly, loving people, nothing like this horrible caricature that's put on the media.
You are defending them.
Absolutely.
You're defending Marshall Applewhite.
Absolutely.
We will go definitely on board a craft to leave when the spading occurs. You could say, well, what's the
But how can Jocelyn explain this image of a wild-eyed, hypnotic cult leader?
He is nothing like that when he's talking to you normally. He always had intense eyes anyway, and that's partly what made him so charismatic.
Jocelyn says it was the power of Doe's personality and beliefs that led him to abandon his Hollywood dream of being an actor and model.
But I had a spiritual quest. I had a spiritual hunger, and these people filled it certainly far more meaningfully than anything else I had found, and I had looked in a lot of different areas.
You left your friends.
My friends.
Your family?
My family, cut off all ties completely.
And ventured on a nomadic life, a 15-year odyssey, living everywhere, from mansions like the one in Rancho Santa Fe to Spartan campsites.
Anyone that has overcome the world more than someone else is their elder.
Jocelyn says the cult gave members a sense of purpose here on Earth and hopes of reaching a higher level. But to get there, they had to live by strict rules.
To get to the kingdom of heaven, you needed to take your changed over body with you. And so everything that we were doing to change over our bodies.
Members were never allowed to be alone. Each always had to have a partner.
We went on special diets. We tried to purify our thoughts. We weren't sexual. We were celibate.
And some men were castrated.
Jesus himself said something about there are those who make themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake.
That's the one.
But Jocelyn began doubting Doe in his teachings, and in 1990, he quit the cult, leaving behind his friends of 15 years, including this man, his last partner, Thomas Nichols.
I'm the happiest person in the world.
Ironically, Nichols was the brother of someone who spent her television career traveling through space, Star Trek's Nichelle Nichols.
Starfleet, do you read?
Jocelyn also left behind his first partner, a woman whose body he will now bring home to her mother.
The woman who was my very first partner in this group. Which I'm happy to do, proud to do.
Jocelyn believes his friends went to their deaths triumphantly.
I think it was a thing that was done with great love. I think the atmosphere could even have been one of joy.
But he insists suicide is not the way to reach the kingdom of heaven.
I think it was a mistake. I'm not defending their suicide except to say that I honored a choice.
How can you say in your heart that the 38 others chose to commit suicide if Doe was still giving the directions?
Well, because a director gives directions, the actor chooses whether he wants to play the role, the way the director's saying.
And one last thing we'd like to say is 39 to beam up. Thank you.
There's much more to learn about Heaven's Gate, and we'll have more on the cult later in this program.
Still ahead, it's a popular pill to pop when trying to...
It was like a Star Trek environment in the sense that it was exploration and it was new frontiers, and but without the family relationships and without the close physical relationships. Okay, so if you can think of people working around the clock in that kind of a Star Trek type environment, then everything takes in a little bit of a scientific flair to it. And so one of the prime things that they were trying to instill in the students was to relinquish all previous ways of thinking about everything and take on a whole new way of thinking about everything. Now, you can call that brainwashing, but every student was enjoying it. Okay?
Well, brainwashing did come to mind.
Sure, I understand that, and I was picking up on your thought.
We wanted our brains washed in the sense that we were...
It sounds like you were constantly made to overcome yourself.
Yeah.
Always being put in a...
There's a lot of joy, though, in it. I know in all the difficulty, there was a lot of laughter. We'd sit around and watch something on TV, and if you could walk in, you might find us all laughing. You wouldn't wonder, why are they laughing?
Did you watch the news?
Oh, yes.
You did? You kept up?
Oh, absolutely.
Did you vote? Were you political?
Just political. We felt our thoughts had power.
If anybody who did want to leave could just leave.
We sometimes paid people to leave.
They paid people to leave?
At one point when we were in Colorado, we offered $1,000 to every classmate who wanted to leave.
Now, what was the purpose of that?
Because it became comfortable for some people. Because here you were living in an environment where half the people are working jobs and half the people are working doing the laundry and doing, so you've got a tremendous support network there, okay? And you can be very comfortable eating good and not worrying about bills because you have a department that takes care of that. You just turn in your check every month or every 2 weeks. And the funds are all delegated to pay the insurance and all the different things in the cars and all. And you just can go about every day kind of feeling, I don't want to go back onto that world and get a job and stuff, So it can be comfortable. So when he did that, no one took them up on it, but there was some people that left pretty soon after that.
But are you glad you left?
Yeah. You know why?
Because you're still here.
Because I'm here. And I'm not
your
there,
body's
so
here.
Why not be glad,
Now, what about you, Justin?
Am I glad that I left? Each time I left the group, I would have experienced relief because the struggles were over. I was never glad. I was always sad. Relieved, but sad.
Do you wish you had been there?
Oh, definitely.
You wish you had gone with them?
I wish I had the strength to have remained, to have gained the kind of control through Doe's help, Dee's help, to have stuck it out and gotten stronger and continued to be a part of that crew. Yes.
Where do you think Sylvia is?
Well, I think she's probably on the mother craft somewhere out there. Let's say that all this is fantasy. I don't believe it's fantasy. Sylvia didn't believe it was fantasy. Doe didn't believe it was fantasy. They believed it was the highest thing that they could do. And they were doing it as a crew over 23 years. I could see the changes in my fellow classmates when I returned after 17 years. Major changes, major behavioral changes.
No, this is in no way meant as any form of disrespect to your wife, Sylvia. But a lot of people think that those 39 were mentally ill.
Well, they probably think I am right now, saying that I wished I was with them. I wish I had the strength to have continued. I think if you were to go into the communities where, let's say in my case, because I came back for a number of years, you spoke to people in the community. I don't think they would say I was mentally ill. I think they'd say I was responsible, that I participated with local press, local politicians, local community people in the community in projects to aid people in need in that community. Not something a mentally ill person would do. Maybe an idealistic person might do, but not the mentally ill person.
Parents of some of these people who just cut off all contact with them are probably agonizing right now, saying, we should have gone in there, gotten them out, and deprogrammed them. And
not all of them are saying that, though.
No, not all of them are saying that, but some are, and I think maybe parents of kids in other groups like this. I mean, let me ask Sawyer first. Should they? Should they go in and
it won't
get
work. I mean, there might be a few isolated cases where they may succeed in doing programming them with new form of brainwashing. But, and that person may be glad in the end. I think that's fine, But essentially, if someone had tried to come and get me, they would have found more resistance because I was certain of what I wanted to do.
Justin, you were not with the group, but you're still a believer. There are others who have left the group. Mm-hmm. How many do you think are out there like you who may still feel the way you do?
That don't doubt that T and O were who they said they were,
and believe that these people have ascended to a craft.
And believe that they've ascended. I don't know. I'd say maybe dozens. I don't know. Maybe there's more.
Is this the end of this on Earth? No? No. What do you mean no?
The end of what? Maybe
the end of this cult, at the end of this. Heaven's Gate. Is that the end? That's finished.
Well, in the way they left, they left when a comet came. A comet has significance historically. They left the Easter week. That has significance historically. They left by laying down their bodies. That has enormous impact. Obviously, a stage is being set by the next level for this world, for others to examine this. And of course, 99.99% of examination will begin and end with closed-mindedness, with the assumption that this has got to be crazy, but assume that maybe it isn't.
Maybe it isn't. But one thing's for sure. Sawyer is no longer sorry he lost that toss of the coin to decide whether or not he should get castrated. He's about to become a father.
I think he took a little too literally, and some of the things I write about in my newsletter, The Galactic Observer, and when I go around talking about my book around the country, I think they took this a little too literally, that spaceships were going to come down and get them. In fact, they had mentioned that to me, that's what was going to happen.
The San Diego Medical Examiner's Office says it has completed autopsies on all 39 cult members who committed suicide last week. Officials may release some of their findings tomorrow. CNN will have much more on this story tonight on Impact. That's at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. The Arab world is considering cutting ties with Israel. Arab League foreign ministers met today in Cairo.
Houston couple preaching a heady blend of Eastern mysticism mixed with cheesy science fiction.
And they said if you are interested in searching for a higher level of existence, a higher plane beyond the third dimension, come with us.
Your brother is interested right away, or not?
Oh, yeah, he said.
For me, for my vehicle, had a strong interest in UFOs and what's going on with these abductions and space aliens.
These are the people, guy. He says, I know it. He says, these are the people. He says, let's go home, pack up the bags, and go.
Steele had a wife by then. He left her and set off with his brother and a friend looking for the mysterious Bo and Pete, who had by now moved on in their search for apostles.
Bo and Pete said to them, if what you truly believe is in your heart, you will find us.
For 10 days, the brothers and friend crisscrossed the western states, driving thousands of miles, asking strangers if they'd seen the two. The two who they thought would guide their souls to a higher, more splendid realm. You got the car and you're loaded up with beer and whatever, and you're looking for Bo and Pete. These people you heard
we're
about.
taking off.
Guy, that's pretty strange stuff.
It is pretty strange stuff. Fascinating. One of the highest points of my life. And every night, of course, we'd camp on top of the hills and look for UFOs, and, because that was our only third-dimensional way that we could see if this thing was really true. And
that somehow the spirit is going to be taken by a UFO? Is that the connection that was made?
If I remember right, I think it was along those lines.
In Oklahoma City, they finally found Bo and Pete.
They seemed just like normal people, but they were the kind of people that when they looked at you, it was like they were looking into your soul. When they were talking to you, they bled honesty.
But Guy St. Louis didn't follow them. He was 19 and didn't want to vow celibacy and give up his material possessions. He went home. You bailed on this whole thing.
Right, so I bailed. It was just an inner feeling that, I love life.
But his brother left Oklahoma with Bo and Pete on a strange journey that would end 22 years later in Rancho Santa Fe.
They took off. We had no contact with him whatsoever.
Postcards, no Thanksgivings, no funny phone calls in the middle of the night. He's gone. What did you think had happened to him?
You don't know. You don't know if he's took off with some Klingon or what, I mean, you just don't know.
Were you worried about him?
Well, everybody's in charge of his own destiny. I mean, if he wants to crash and burn, that's his option.
Steele dropped out of sight for the next 12 years until he came home for a family funeral at the end of the 80s and stayed on, rented a house, found work. But 3.5 years was all he could take of what the cult called human life. In 1992, he recorded a tape before returning to the group.
I want everybody who may see this or to know that I have chosen to leave. I want to rejoin my Heavenly Father and my classmates.
Was he a recruiter for this organization?
No, I never knew him to, I never knew him to recruit anybody till he recruited my sister.
And that is the double tragedy of the story of Gary Steele St. Louis. In 1993, he enticed his half-sister, Dana Abreu, a paralegal living in Denver, to join the group. Like Steele, she was hungry for spiritual answers. How did he attract your sister? What was the lure?
I think, my sister very much was a lot of the same mind as him. In other words, this is a great life, but there's got to be a reason for me being here other than me getting up every morning and going to work at 8 o'clock, getting off at 5, come home, pop a couple of beers, and watch television.
So all the big questions of life.
Right, all of them there. And I think that maybe he had some of the answers, and so they left.
Dana severed all ties with the family. In 1994, she was photographed in a cult training tape.
Our teachers' names are T and Do.
By 1997, as the comet approached, the brother and half-sister were inside that gated mansion in California, making ready. How did you find out?
I heard it on the news, and I made a couple phone calls to a couple friends of mine.
Did you know that it was your brother's group?
I had a feeling. I had a gut feeling.
I don't think any of us are going to forget the eerie videotape that the police shot going through that mansion.
Yeah,
huh?
and what is so sad is here I'm the father of a son, and mass suicide, the largest in American history, and that's kind of a tough pill to swallow,
This group had, what would we call it, manifest destiny. In other words, their agenda was a finale.
The three St. Louises met at our invitation near San Diego, where Shauna lives. Shauna doesn't remember her brother Steele. Divorce separated the family when she was very young. But she was shocked to discover that the brother she never knew, but often wondered about, had been living only 6 miles from her home.
I'm just kind of thankful, perhaps, that I didn't know where he was a couple years ago, or I might have been there, too. I was a mess. I was going through some very emotional time. Life just didn't seem worth living as I knew it.
If your brother had called up 2 years ago and said, Sean, I've got this really interesting life I want to talk to you about,
I'd have been gone in a heartbeat.
We're very happy and proud to have been.
As we played the unsettling video farewells, Guy, who had flirted with the cult's ideas as a young man, sometimes nodded as though he recognized a familiar thought. But one woman's quavering farewell got to Shauna.
And couldn't be happy about what we're about to do.
I don't see any happiness in her at all. That really, the more I see it, that kind of scares me right there.
2 family members tempted, 2 gone. Dana was 35, Steele 44.
I am very thankful that we're not staying here for the recycling process on this planet.
Your family has suffered a great hurt because of this.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't hear you condemning your brother for it.
Well, my brother had his own beliefs. My sister had her own beliefs. And I'm not the judgmental kind of person who can condemn people for their beliefs. If they want to take their own life, that's their decision. If their decision does not affect physical injury to others, and they made their decision, they followed through. They hit their goal.
Many of the families have requested cremation for their loved ones and asked for their ashes. The family of cult leader Marshall Applewhite says he will be buried in a San Antonio cemetery next to his father. We'll have more on this story on Dateline Tuesday.
What does it take to make tap water taste like this? Very little. The ingenious filter inside the Brita water filtration pitcher virtually eliminates lead and chlorine. Tap water becomes clear, fresh, wonderful water.
For me, no reason to stay a moment longer. The discs were sent to a former cult member, Rio, who first discovered the bodies last Wednesday, revealing a cult not just obsessed with spaceships and aliens, but a cult of personality. Cult deprogrammer Ted Patrick.
That was no suicide. That was murder. And it, like Jim Jones, it wasn't no suicide. That was murder. Anytime you hypnotize a person to jump off of the Golden Gate Bridge or kill your family or kill yourself or anybody they tell you to kill, and they do it, the person responsible for that is the person that programmed them to do it in the first place.
On the holiday celebrating the resurrection of the Christian Messiah, there were warnings about false messiahs.
The Jim Jones, the David Koreshes, Applewhite messiahs always take others with them to the grave. Jesus Christ went alone and came back victorious over it.
Cult members did believe in a race of space aliens that were highly evolved, the ones they thought would pick them up in the spaceship. But they apparently also believed the world was ruled by satanic aliens. According to the San Diego Union newspaper, a document was sent to a man who bought a ranch in New Mexico from the Heaven's Gate cult last April, a ranch where they had built a so-called Earthship of tires and cement. The document spoke of fallen angels who roamed the universe as space aliens called Luciferians. Aliens they believed who forced people to live in blind conformity. In San Diego, the medical examiner confirmed their role was coming to an end.
What's going to happen today here? Paperwork today. The autopsies are all done?
The county examiner confirmed there were no visible signs of cancer in his body. Applewhite lied to his followers, convincing 38 other people he was worth dying for. Rusty Dornan, CNN, San Diego, California.
California community by people who used a comet for guidance and the internet to promote their cult's doctrine. Now, this raises disturbing questions about the popularity and appeal of groups that abandon the religious mainstream. In a joint CNN Time magazine investigation, Impact's Art Harris begins with the latest we know.
Exclusive suburbs of Rancho Santa Fe, a haven for the rich outside San Diego, and a stairway to heaven for the cult next door.
Death by overdose and suffocation, self-inflicted, 39 suicides.
When they landed in Rancho Santa Fe last year looking for a dream home, they found a very private mansion outside town.
They were specifically looking for a large property. We're talking $1 million type property. One day I saw them walking across the street and I thought, those people are different. But everybody's different.
Like any newcomers, they hit town and tried to do some business. At Gigabytes Cafe, they drank cappuccinos and pitched their product.
It was pretty much just a networking trip, just how getting my word out, that they're making websites and they want people to view them.
Making websites in their latest hometown. And at a nearby car wash, making new friends.
They were probably the sweetest, warmest guys that you could befriend. I mean, they were really sweet. They always had a smile, and we bonded really tight with them. These are folks that I wish I saw more of.
They tried to fit in, but people here in Rancho Santa Fe did notice that, like some of us, well, they did look a little different. Odd. They were odd. They were the cult next door. Spiritual nomads light years beyond their early roots in mainstream religion, who are nearing the end of a long and twisted odyssey. An odyssey that began in the summer of '72 in Texas, when a Houston music teacher, the son of a minister, hooked up with a nurse who was into astrology. She offered to do his chart. They declared a spiritual bond, left their families behind, and hit the road on a platonic journey.
She just said that they felt like they had a mission and that God was leading them somewhere.
When Terry Nettles next saw her mother, Bonnie, and Marshall Applewhite, they seemed, well, electric.
I felt like I was in the presence of something huge, something bigger than words could ever express.
They'd become New Age evangelists, preaching Jesus and UFOs. One of many cults inspired by the coming of Comet Kohoutek in 1975, all vying to be the first to be beamed up.
We were intrigued by them because they were so mobile. In fact, they've always not wanted to attach a label to themselves, and so we just kind of gave them a label ourselves and called them the Vagabond UFO cult, because they were traveling around to different cities around the country, especially the Northwest and the Southwest.
They called themselves Bo and Pete, spiritual shepherds offering their sheep a one-way ticket to the stars. In the mid-'70s, cult investigator Gretchen Passantino actually heard them preach a bizarre theology of UFO resurrection that drew on the book of Revelation.
Bo and Pete, who believed that they were the two witnesses of Revelation chapter 11, would be killed. Their bodies would lie in the street for 3 days, and then they would be raised into a spacecraft to prove that they had the true UFO gospel.
Now, it can come from me.
Their gospel demanded devotees give up all earthly possessions, family, money, sex, and prepare to evolve to a higher level. Only the UFO never landed, and Applewhite landed in jail for credit card fraud. Soon, Applewhite and Nettles changed their names again to T and Doe.
T and Doe never were out to con anybody. If they conned anybody, they conned themselves first by believing what they did, and then the rest of us entered into it.
Dick Jocelyn joined the cult in 1975. It offered a place to belong for 15 years, but it was a rigid life of rules and isolation.
It was like the military. There were all these little assignments and routines, and every time somebody would mess something up, then we had to develop a procedure to prevent that from happening again. So we had books of procedures.
I can give you the good news of the...
And we saw ourselves as being prepared for membership in this level that we were the guardians of the earth.
The cult leaders had flexible beliefs.
They didn't have any problem with updating or altering what they taught, or aspects of what they taught. But the basic message was the same, that this is a garden. It's time for us to be harvested in a rapture type of experience.
New Mexico, the last stop before California. Here, they awaited the rapture behind a walled fortress. They'd wandered for years like nomads, working for a few weeks, then moving on, living for months at a time in tents or campers.
And so there was something like 8 or 10 of us living in these trailers. And in order to do that, some of us had to be sleeping while others were up and awake.
Always waiting for a sign, like an angry volcano.
When Mount St. Helens blew, when the different earthquakes occurred, we were always wondering, okay, is this it? Is this a signal? Are they going to come for us now? Because are things going to hit the fan so bad that they'll come and take us away? We were really anticipating that.
At least once, they even picked up a signal from Hollywood. It was the movie Cocoon, about a bunch of old guys in search of a cosmic fountain of youth.
So T and Doe thought, well, maybe we're being sort of given a signal that that's how we're going to be picked up. So we went down, we moved to Galveston, got a big houseboat, worked on it, got it all ready to go out and take like a little cruise and maybe be picked up. But before we ever got it completed, they decided that no, this isn't what we're supposed to be doing. So we packed everything up and headed off to Texas or somewhere.
All this time in all those places, Applewhite insisted the cult abstain from sex. Years earlier, he'd been disgraced by discovery of his own homosexuality.
I was celibate, totally celibate. No masturbation, no nothing, for 15 years. Now, the body does some very interesting things when you do that. There are other ways you can channel that energy, and it can make you very creative. You don't necessarily go nuts.
At one point, Applewhite and others took celibacy a giant step further. They got castrated.
And these people had certainly shown that they were true and devoted and in control of their body by not letting it do all the things the sexually active body wants to do. Then why not remove the battle? Because the glands are still giving you a battle of sorts.
I get off track all the time.
In the end, Applewhite appears to have convinced his followers he was terminally ill, even though there's no evidence from the San Diego County Medical Examiner to support that.
Okay, if he's now sick, and he thinks he's going to have to go the way T did, in other words, die, then I can see him presenting this to the class, and I'm sure that it may have even come from some members of the class to say, well, I would just as soon leave my body too.
In fact, according to the suicide notes sent on a disc to a former cult member, they didn't want to live any longer. Time's Kathy Booth got the first look at them.
When we finally decoded the disc, we found there was a series of suicide notes meant for the internet. And one of the women who wrote one of the notes made it clear that they knew their leader, Doe, was dying.
What did she say?
Well, in the letter, she says, once he is gone, there is nothing left here on the face of the earth for me. No reason to stay a moment longer.
Something big was about to happen. Only no one took their signals seriously, at least on the internet, where the cult was claiming this time a UFO tailing the Hale-Bopp comet was their taxi to resurrection. After all, Easter was coming. Around town, the cult next door was paying its bills in advance, picking up the mail, eating a sort of Last Supper of turkey pot pie, and bidding a cryptic farewell to friends at the car wash.
And he said, hey, Alex, we just stopped by to say goodbye. And he took off his pendant and handed it to me.
It came from a UFO convention, a souvenir Fleet once admired.
And he said that they were leaving, and I said, well, let me write down a phone number so that I can get a hold of you, because you guys are saying something's going to happen March 25th. And he said, well, where we're going, there's no phones.
They packed their bags, downed their potions, and laid back for the ride. Their neighbors had no idea what had happened until the former cult member who got the disc went inside the house as instructed. These pictures, seen on television for the first time here on Impact, show the dead leader they called Doe, and just who he promised his followers they would meet on their final journey.
When we come back, Stephen Frazier looks at what draws people to cults and how they can be induced to sacrifice their own lives.
The view from inside a cult.
She was the only one that woke up, and that's why she said, I'm the onlyest one alive.
The appeal of the cult's leader. The power of his control.
And Jim got into that money.
One woman's account of 20 years with a cult that ended in the largest mass suicide ever discovered, and how she survived. If you want to know more about this story, read Time magazine this week.
Got a pretty decent-sized chunk of land to mow? Say, Montana?
Had to get 38 people or 900 people to kill themselves. In this next story, one woman answers. A woman who followed Jim Jones for 20 years, giving him her faith, her money, and her sense of self, but hiding when he asked for her life. She was the only person found alive in Jonestown.
I wanted really University of Oregon with our study of the long-term effects on the cult members. And we were out in Oregon and we heard about this cult that was a flying saucer cult in 1972 out there. And we met quite a few people who actually had been caught up into it. And their stories were really quite fascinating. And I think that this group now is a future spin-off from the group out on the Oregon coast in the early 70s.
These are smart people. What was the mechanism?
A typical victim. I would say that American society the kinds of changes we are going through, the kinds of stresses people are under. I think that everybody in their own way can become vulnerable now to the number and kinds of manipulative messages, deceitful messages, self-aggrandizing messages for power and money. And I think that that's where we are all vulnerable today.
Needed to be disciplined when they countered what Jim said or when they disobeyed him.
I think he got money struck and passed struck. I really believe, sometimes he really believed that he was...
To commit crimes, it's a lot harder to do things like this. But we give ourselves so much freedom. We give ourselves not only the freedom to do good, but the freedom to do evil. And unfortunately, that's a byproduct of living in a free society.
But I don't think we just have to accept that and say that, therefore, we're not going to try to understand these groups.
Brought along with all kinds of crazy ideas from some charismatic leader from Nazi Germany on back. I mean, this is a continuing cycle with human beings.
I think this is true.
Well, I've got to take a break. Let me do that right now. And I want to remind Vince, you may not know this, but his former defendant of Charles Manson has his own web...
Under the bed. Next thing I knew, it was Sunday morning, November 19, 1978. When I got outside, it was like a ghost town.
Well, then I knew they all was dead, and I called Whitney all of the name. And nobody said a word, nobody moved.
I started screaming. I thought maybe I was dead too.
It looked like a battlefield. I had to pinch myself to feel that I was alive, and I was the only one alive.
I think the most important lesson that we can learn from Hyacinth is that any intelligent, sensitive person can very easily be caught up in a group that turns out to be cultic.
Oh, that man was a mess. He'd done a lot of things I never thought he'd ever done.
When Marion Town first began helping Hyacinth Thrash tell her story, she just wanted to document an historic life. But now she hopes the story sounds an alarm about false messiahs. An alarm that rings true because it is sounded not by an expert, but by a survivor.
The story continues online. Join our discussion after the program in the Impact Forum at cnn.com/impact.
Some of their customers, and we've seen some of those sample sites, and they did a pretty good job. They were professional, colorful, great photographs, etc. They also have another website called Heaven's Gate, where they have published hundreds of pages of documents about their philosophy and their religion. Mostly those look like excerpts from other books that they've published and videotapes that they've made. Clearly this group was very media savvy. In addition to all kinds of computers in their house, they had, huge television sets, and they really knew how to use the media. They also were using the internet to recruit new members, and in fact they went out onto these use groups and put out sort of form letters soliciting people to come join them. We've even spoken to some people who say that they were solicited directly over email with offers to come work and live with them.
Does that, do you think, set the stage for more web bashing, just as the pornography issue caused a lot of criticism of the internet, the fact that this information is being disseminated over the internet? I
think the internet's a reflection of society, and you see the whole gamut out there. And of course, some people are concerned that this will tarnish the image further.
Yeah, it sure will. Okay, I'm going to take a break. We're going to talk more about Manson then with our experts. That's cool.
Applewhite may have manipulated his followers to commit suicide. Applewhite convinced cult members he was dying of cancer. But now a coroner's report shows Applewhite had no signs of cancer. That coincides with a former cult member who says followers may not have had a choice whether or not to kill themselves.
They were sitting around each other and therefore experiencing peer pressure in terms of making that kind of public commitment. And I think that when you get people to make a public commitment like that in front of each other, it's going to be very difficult then to back down from what you said you were going to do. But they didn't look completely convinced to me, and they looked like they were experiencing a great deal of anxiety and stress.
Strangely enough, all 39 cult members had insurance policies covering them against alien abduction. Their bodies will be released to their families beginning tomorrow.
A British newspaper is reporting that the Irish Republican Army supplied the detonator for the fertilizer bomb used in Oklahoma City. The Sunday Telegraph is reporting that...
In the letter, she says, once he is gone, there is nothing left here on the face of the earth for me. No reason to stay a moment longer.
But Applewhite's autopsy showed the group had apparently been fooled.
Saying the autopsy had demonstrated no visual sign of cancer in Marshall Applewhite's liver or other organs.
The medical examiner says all the autopsies have now been completed, with the exception of detailed toxicological tests. All the information still points to 39 suicides by drug overdose and or suffocation. In church services here in Rancho Santa Fe, California, where the suicides occurred, and in Easter services across the nation, the tragic suicides were remembered.
The Jim Jones, the David Koreshes, and the Marshall Applewhite Messiahs always take others with them to the grave. Jesus Christ went alone and came back victorious over it.
Authorities believe the 39 suicide victims were the only members of the cult, and the case is now apparently closing on the group called Heaven's Gate. Jim Hill, CNN, San Diego, California.
Oklahoma City bombing suspect.
Call infrequently. It may be something to be concerned about.
Mm-hmm. Do you blame the leader of the cult here, Mr. Applewhite, or do you think that your brother went along willingly?
Well, I'm really not sure at this point. I'm waiting for more information to come out. It seems at this point that the leader was basically responsible.
Mm-hmm. James Sandow, we thank you very much for joining us this morning. His brother Michael Barr Sandow was among those who died in the mass suicide in California last week. Thank you, sir.
Stewart. And then
before you choose a vacation, ask yourself some questions.
No matter how much we learn about the mass suicide in Southern California, many of us still ask why. The deaths are on the front cover of Newsweek, and the story has been examined extensively by veteran reporter Gregory Beals. Beals has covered many stories of world interest from Haiti to Hale-Bopp, and he joins us live from our CNN bureau in New York. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
The appeal of Applewhite. Now we hear that he had convinced his followers he had cancer, and then that was not true according to autopsies. What was this appeal?
You know, it's really hard to fathom. I think it was pretty much a conglomeration of New Ageism, science fiction, all of the elements of mass culture that some of us like a part of, but they seem to have been a little bit overboard with it.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that struck me is that this group was not cut off as many cults are. They were reading the papers. They were allowed to watch television. They were allowed to watch news reports. They were on the internet. They were not cut off from reality, and yet this had such a strong appeal to them, this mystique. What have you learned?
Well, you know, that's right. And moreover, I mean, many of the people who were part of this cult had been part of this cult for decades. I mean, many of them were there for at least 2 decades. So I think that speaks a lot to Applewhite's kind of personal appeal. And the other thing that I think is kind of interesting here is you have folks like John Craig, for example, who is a rancher out of Colorado. He's having what most people would think is a wonderful life, and all of a sudden, one day he goes and sees Applewhite and he's gone. I think that speaks of Applewhite's personal kind of appeal for these people.
Right. Another thing that's interesting is that they were, many of them, not down and out. They were not destitute. In fact, some trust funds were supporting the group. How did you discover all of this?
Well, I mean, in terms of the investigation itself, it was just a matter of kind of tracking down all of the victims and their families. You found that, I mean, one of the things that struck me again was all of the victims' parents or relatives described them as normal people. They described them not as folks who were crazy in any sense, not as people who were just kind of gone off the deep end. I mean, these were people who were normal. In many ways, the victims the victims' families see them as kind of just honoring a promise that they made to their leader.
Mm-hmm. They were looking for signs constantly, yet so many of us do look for signs. We check our horoscope, we crack open the fortune cookie with interest. Were you ever struck by how much these characteristics are part of everyday life, but just taken to extreme?
Well, yes. I mean, in Applewhite's case, one of the things that we found were letters that his wife, Bonnie Lou Truesdale, who went by the name of T, she sent letters where she thought the world was going to come to an end because the car had broken down. Applewhite himself was arrested in southern Texas for driving a stolen automobile, and after he was taken to the jail, the first thing he did was call a press conference to talk about how UFOs were going to come and that he was going to be killed.
Mm-hmm. The lifestyle of this group was a little extreme. They were somewhat sleep deprived in that they got up at very early hours to look for signs in the sky. Their food was monitored. These are classic cult techniques, aren't they?
Well, yes, and I think that getting up very early in the sky, especially during the last weeks before their suicide, had a lot to do with the Hale-Bopp comet. I think that the comet appeared at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. My guess is that those people came out to look at the comet and to see where their future would be.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your insights and your investigation, Gregory Beals.
Thank you.
Some stormy weather yesterday. Or other organs.
Autopsies have been finished on all 39 cult members. Earlier on Good Morning America, a relative of one victim and a former member of the cult talked about the mass suicide.
Wasn't our girl.
Yeah.
At the end, that was that cult leader's girl. Wasn't our girl. He got inside of her head somehow.
I was extremely committed to the group, and yet I did have hesitation in my body, when I felt that, and that might have had something to do with me leaving, too.
The FBI is now working with the San Diego County Sheriff's Department to look through the group's computers. They're looking for more information about Heaven's Gate and the possibility that other cult members may exist. Elizabeth?
All right, Jane, thank you for that report. In other news, thousands are without electricity in the Seattle area this morning after a storm packing winds up to 70 miles an hour knocked down power lines.
23 years of hard work, and if anything, I might be sad that I couldn't make the grade and have been with him.
You also mentioned, Sawyer, that suicide is not the right word for this. What are the right words?
Well, I don't think I've come up with one to replace that word, but it's a transition that they made, and they were so prepared for it. It wasn't like an escape, okay? That suicide I'm trying to get away from the world because I'm having a miserable time. They didn't find any reason to be here any longer because they felt like they learned enough of their lessons, and it didn't offer them anything to stay, and they wanted to move on to the next kingdom that they believed so strongly in.
You both spent a good portion of time with Heaven's Gate. You spent 19 years. I'm going to ask you both this question, but Sawyer, let's start with you first. Why did you leave?
It was a combination of things. I just felt like I wasn't learning as much as I felt like I needed to, and also I wanted to experience something new. And I was having a sense of maybe some family ideas, feelings inside my body. I was over 40, and
When you felt the family ideas, did you verbalize those with Marshall Applewhite?
Well, eventually I did. It took a long time for me to recognize that this is what was going on, and because I was very committed for at least 17 years, very strongly.
What happened when you verbalized those thoughts?
He talked. We worked it. We talked about it, and but see, it wasn't. I didn't talk about, well, I need to leave, until almost a year and a half later. And when I finally did talk to him about saying that I need to leave, he said, "Okay, I understand. You've thought it out. You want to be more objective, and so you want to leave and see how it feels." I said, "That's right." And he asked me where I wanted to go, and he gave me some money. And
Wayne, you were in, you were out, you were in, you were out.
Right.
Why?
Something I've agonized over for a number of years, of course. I think if there was one word, it would be selfishness on my part, or an inability to get a handle on my self-reliance, my independent kind of nature.
What's wrong with independence?
It's great in the human world. It's great.
Why is it
get you through
not
a lot of
good
things?
in the Heaven's Gate world?
In the Heaven's Gate, in the next level, the kingdom of heaven, you have crew-mindedness. You're working with a partner. If there's disagreement on something with your partner, you're looking to your older member or a member in that level that has more experience, that has been there to help you or supervise you. You look to that person. And then you go back with your partner and you proceed. And things work in this fashion. It's crew-mindedness. It's not, I'm going to do things my own way.
Was Heaven's Gate, was the thinking built on love and trust?
Well, yes.
Loving your fellow crew members, trusting your fellow crew members?
There was that.
Because the reason why...
I think the most love or caring would always be directed to your older member, because this is really where you're getting your nourishment, your duties that come down to you, that where you can grow by following.
Well, the reason why I ask, because when you joined, you and your wife left behind a little daughter.
Yes.
How could you leave behind in a world that you believe to be a corrupted world, a world that was going to be spaded over? You leave behind your flesh and blood to wander this, what you deem to be a cold world, alone and defenseless.
Well, it was very difficult. The only thing that made it possible is that we left to join a classroom that was created by two members that came from the heavens. If God wanted me, to put it simply, if God wanted me, chose me through no merit of my own, but if he chose me, and I recognize this, I'm sure he'll take care of my offspring. I have that faith that she will have every assistance, maybe invisible, that the Creator, through the chain of minds, through the Creator's helpers, angels, whatever, that is necessary.
Lee, how did you find Marshall Applewhite, or did he find you?
Marshall found me. Our first initial contact was a telephone call in December.
Mm-hmm. And what did he like about Voice in the Mirror, the book that you wrote?
Marshall felt that Voice in the Mirror contained the prophecy that confirmed the belief that he was giving to his classmates or the other members of his group.
What is this, I don't know if it's rumor or theory, that he is to return within a week's time?
Last night at 12 o'clock, through 3 other intermediaries, I received a message from that group. The message was, the all clear signal has come through and we are gathering now. It's a simple message that came across the fax machine.
Do you believe you will see your former leader again? Is he coming back?
It's possible. I don't...
Do you believe it?
Do I believe it?
Yes.
No. I don't believe it right now, but that doesn't mean I cannot change.
All right. You were going to say something there?
They seem to believe that they're going to return on a light ship to gather the second group, and I don't know, I wasn't made aware if there were other groups, but there probably are other people there that are sympathetic to this. And I know this is a tragedy, but I feel that that was not the message that Marshall or Brother Doe, as we came to know each other, that the others were interpreting it this way. I think that they fully intended to walk onto a spaceship physically, not leave their containers behind, as is what happened. I believe Marshall wanted me to believe that he was dying of cancer.
Tell me about that, because the autopsies say that there were no signs of that.
When I met Marshall 2 weeks ago, he told me that he was dying of liver cancer. He was supported by another gentleman, and he looked very sick. He was a frail old man. He was very kind, very nice to me. So were the other members of the group. I just felt that these nice people were deluded into believing something that was terribly, terribly wrong.
Do you feel you were deluded into believing something that was terribly wrong?
No.
Do you?
No. There would be no need for deception. If it came down that this is the way that the class was to exit, I would have no problems with that.
Is Heaven's Gate done? Is it over?
No.
Why do you say no?
the evidence is here right now. We're continuing it right now by our discussion because there's going to be people that are going to be interested in what really happened. We can shed a little light on that. We're not going to shed all the light on it.
You're about to become a father. We didn't have a chance to get into the whole celibacy issue and all of that. Do you feel comfortable enough about this world that Brother Doe said was going to be spaded under, that you bring a fresh new flower into this world?
Well, I have a positive outlook on life. I don't feel like people that are looking for the positives in things are going to experience negative. Doesn't mean there won't be challenges, even if the world is spaded under. But what am I going to do to change that? Okay, so I have to go about my life directing it as I feel in my heart. Okay, and right now I feel to proceed. Well, of course, I have no choice in the matter now. I don't choose to have any choice because I'm very happy about this. And if I have to deal with calamities and things like that, well, I'll swallow and work on it, But I'm not going to fear it. That's the one thing I can't be behind, having a fear type of thinking of the end of the world is coming and we all got to fearfully join some group. Okay, now, I don't know why Doe feels led to say that. Okay, I was a part of that, doing that same thing, but now I don't feel that way.
Gentlemen, we could take hours to discuss all of this. I have to leave it here. Sawyer, Wayne Cook, also Lee, thank you all three for being with us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
16 past the hour. Next, families and victims remember a day of terror in Oklahoma City and look ahead to the trial of the man.
I don't want you to think that we're doubting your integrity.
As she reads in this March 1973 letter, Rita desperately pleads with deadbeat Herf to repay the $3,000 bank loan.
We know that you cannot handle even the interest on the note that was due the 21st. I truly wish I didn't have to even mention this particular thing in this letter, but we have to know how to proceed.
3 months later, referring to Tom McNair's outrage at the overdue loan, Herf responds to Rita's letter, writing, "I'm sorry for Tom's anger. He will one day be repaid many-fold." Then came this final letter from Herf Applewhite in August 1973.
In one way, I'm sorry I caused you suffering. In another way, I know it was an opportunity for your spiritual growth, and though needless to say, it was not done with that in mind. Now that we are in the full-time employ of the Chief, our Father, all that we receive is for his work only, and our personal lives have been dissolved. My love is with you both, that you might find fulfillment. May God's grace and peace fill your hearts. Sincerely, Herf and Bonnie.
And with that, Rita concluded Herf had left them holding the bag, alienating himself from friends and family. She searches for answers.
I think when his father died, that had a tragic effect on him. And I think when he left the University of St. Thomas and was disappointed in not being able to work with Leonard Bernstein as he had supposed.
Rita and Tom were forced to sell a prize filly to cover Herf's debt. They spent the next 10 years breeding and showing prize horses. But all along, Rita kept tabs on Herf, reading about his crusade in this Houston Post article. She sent it to Applewhite's mother, Louise, with a note saying, "I am so sorry Herf has abandoned you."
His family was devastated. They didn't know how to cope with it.
Then, out of the blue, Rita received a surprise in her mailbox.
In 1984, which is many years after we lost touch with him, because I had not seen him since 72 or 73, had not had a phone call or anything. Here came this letter from someone. It's not the same handwriting, with a cashier's check for $3,000.
Someone, presumably from Heaven's Gate, paid off Herf's debt.
Because it was in someone else's handwriting, I assumed that he had died, perhaps.
She was wrong, but tragically she would see the end of her friend's life on national television 10 days ago as Applewhite and his 38 followers committed suicide.
The sad thing about it is all the good that the man did is nullified by the end. And that's why I wanted to speak out, because I think the world needs to know.
How ironic. After 10 years, a check arrives. It's believed Applewhite received his money from 2 cult members who turned over their inheritances. And Extra has discovered another letter to show you just how distant Applewhite had grown from his own family. It's from Applewhite's sister, Louise Winant, written December 3rd, 1984. Now, in the letter, she writes, "Your children are fine, and you now have 4 grandchildren." Applewhite did not even know he had grandchildren. He had not been in contact with his family for about 10 years.
Well, Brad, we've learned a lot about Heaven's Gate in the last week, but now you're about to see a far more dangerous group that could add an explosive element to the cult madness. It looks like a typical church in a tiny rural town, but it's run by a man whose message is pure hate.
There's only one group of people that can be supremacists. That's white people.
I think people should be afraid because his message instills hate into people who are already hating. It instills violence into people who want to be violent.
Richard Albanese is an author and journalist who investigates cults and militias. He says the Church of Christ in LaPorte, Colorado is a cult of about 100 people, led by the Reverend Pete Peters, whose influence reaches across the country.
He is a spiritual leader of many of the individuals who are involved in the racist white supremacist movement. He offers them sort of a theological base for their prejudice, for their hate, for their desire to relegate people who are not white to a secondary position.
This week's Newsweek magazine points to the LaPorte Church as one of the sects with potential to explode. Trouble's been brewing since 1977, when Peters began preaching a belief system called Christian identity. In his pamphlets and audio-taped sermons, Peters calls for the reign of Aryan whites, death to homosexuals, and he claims Jews are responsible for all evils in the world, including the Oklahoma City bombing.
Don't you deny it. I know you people. I haven't been preaching as long as I have been preaching not to know the sins of you people.
According to Peters' Scriptures for America, which can also be found on the internet, an apocalyptic race war is approaching and whites must be prepared.
The Antichrist is going to rise and force all people to take the mark of the beast. In order to avoid this, they store up food, weapons, clothing, and they want to move off into an isolated region to avoid this Antichrist.
Peters' separatist message is closely linked to militias like the Freemen in Montana and hate groups like the Aryan Nation and the Ku Klux Klan. In fact, the Reverend is seen in this video introducing Louis Beam, a former Grand Dragon of the KKK, at a supremacist meeting in Colorado in 1992.
Father, you know how badly we need wisdom in this time. For the remainder of this meeting, let it flow from your throne.
Although their messages are very different, Albanese sees similarities between Pete Peters and Marshall Applewhite, who led the Heaven's Gate cult into mass suicide last week.
Peters, Applewhite, Koresh, all of these individuals had a lot of charisma. They could speak to their congregations. They knew how to identify with their congregations, and it made their followers feel very much a part of something great.
In public, Peters never directly calls for acts of violence, but Albanese says if confronted, the pastor and his congregation could become dangerous.
If Pete Peters was attacked, or if he felt he was being attacked, he'd fight back in a second. No problem. He would take up arms and use them according to his God-given right.
Amen.
Well, experts who track these groups say they are seeing increasing interaction between militia groups and UFO believers. They often share information on bomb shelters and weapons.
Libby, Princess Diana can't be feeling too safe these days. A recent clash with a photographer and a prowler in the palace have raised some questions about Di's security. It's time to get plugged in.
Was basically, for much of his life, a closet homosexual.
From the undocumented early years to a final visit by members, Extra has new details on the cult madness. He's brought new excitement and huge crowds, but not everyone thinks Tiger Woods is good for golf.
He uncovered a world of paranoia and sexual confusion that still managed to draw people into cult madness.
I joined with Ian Joe in September 1st, 1975.
Since March of 76.
Since Valentine's Day, 21 years ago.
Many of the dead had been believers since the beginning.
I haven't really processed the whole thing myself because I know some of those people that committed suicide.
Sociology professor Robert Ball knew them back then. As a graduate student, he and a fellow student were intrigued by a UFO flyer. They went to a meeting and decided to study the group from the inside.
And so we ended up posing as members for a couple of months.
Life in that group, as it was known in 1975, was a far cry from how it all ended. There were no posh mansions, or New Age uniform. Balch describes many of the recruits as heavy drug users, simply dropping out from society.
Single, unattached, very mobile, few material possessions, sort of people who were made up a kind of floating clientele for a lot of religious cults in those days.
Balch remembers the group as being highly unorganized, split into factions that traveled the countryside. Its leaders, Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Lou Nettles, were in hiding, fearing assassination. After 2 uneventful months, Balch and his friend returned to the real world.
At the time, when all you're doing is just traveling and you're not talking and you're reading the Bible, it gets boring, and people got bored.
Though many of the dead are original members, Balch estimates the group had a 50 to 80% dropout level in '75. That all changed 1 year later when T and Doe reorganized their group in the mountains of Wyoming. Members' lives were mapped out to the minute.
You can't be thinking about the past. You can't be dwelling on your doubts. You can't be focused on the future. You got to be totally focused right there on the present.
Suddenly, members stopped dropping out. Balch, now at the University of Montana, wrote and co-wrote a series of sociological articles on his experiences. He learned about the man called Doe from interviews with some ex-members.
Herb Applewhite, who later became Bo or Doe, was basically, for much of his life, a closet homosexual, and he felt incredibly guilty about that.
This could explain why 8 of the dead, including Applewhite, were found to be castrated.
If, in fact, he was having difficulty overcoming his sexuality, then the castration seems to be a totally logical sort of thing in the context of their belief system.
Self-castration is one very effective way, both of showing commitment, and if you've got continual sexual identity problems, it solves those problems in a fairly convincing manner.
Dr. J. Gordon Melton has followed Professor Balch's work on the UFO cult. As a research specialist in religion, now with the University of California, Santa Barbara, he too attended a lecture given by T and Doe.
My father and I left 2,000 years ago.
Melton was sent this videotape of Applewhite out of the blue in 1994.
When you put all of his words together, he's talking about the end of society as we know it.
Balch received more than just a videotape. 2 group members paid him a visit in 1994, 12 years after he lost touch with the cult.
They were pleasant, they were smart, easy to talk to, they had a good sense of humor.
He even got a note written on behalf of Doe, thanking him for being impartial to the group in his articles. The next he heard of the UFO cult was a news broadcast from Rancho Santa Fe. And while both Balch and Melton are fairly certain they've seen the last of Heaven's Gate, they're not so sure this story won't be told again.
There's hundreds of so-called religious cults out there. Most of them are fairly small. A lot of them are probably extremely secretive, like this group. Obviously,
a lot of the little digital clocks we've got, if it's...
I have no doubt that there's other groups that are very similar to that.
Strange how you hear what went on inside that cult. Well, some of the 39 suicide victims have now been buried. As for Applewhite, his sister says she plans to bury the cult leader in San Antonio, Texas,